Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. How is it going? I suspect that I'm live now. How is everybody? I'm not good, people. I'm not good. I'm not good. I'm not good at all. I got a bee in my bonnet today. I got a bee in my bonnet. I don't know what the hell that means. A bonnet, I guess, was an old school hat. There we go. Snail, hello. Hey, everybody. It is Sunday, and I have returned to Twitter. Very much was a mistake. I do not advise that you do so. Unfortunately, it was a lovely little healthy break from the platform, but I've already found myself within a day embroiled in all sorts of drama and a lot of dumb arguments about stupid things, about very, very dumb things. There is no precedent for a bee being in my bonnet. We're all live. Hey there, War on Terra. Hello there. Okay, so there are people out there that are seemingly confused about the purpose of my channel, why I exist as a person. And firstly, I exist. There is a very complicated reason for that we'd have to go into, but it would be very complicated. And I'm not sure if I would get demonetized for talking about it. However, for the channel itself, I want to clarify the purpose of this channel, and it is, as I have said so many times before, to advocate for miniature wargamers, not for companies. It is for miniature wargamers, okay? And that is my prime directive, and that includes Warhammer players. That includes Warhammer 40k players. Right? Warhammer 40k players make up the vast majority of people in the wargaming hobby. I think this is just a reality of the situation. I'm sure most of us here today have probably played Warhammer or collected Warhammer, or at the very least are aware of Warhammer to some extent. Well, it is the sun by which all of us revolve. Unfortunately, I wish that this was not the case. I do not want this to be the case. I think it's bad to have a single monolithic company at the center, at the bleeding heart of this hobby, but that is the case. That is why I talk about Warhammer all the time, because the things that Games Workshop do impact a very large amount of hobbyists, and I think that it is incredibly ignorant to think that I would not cover those topics as a result. Okay. However, as part of all of this, right, we take that information, we set it to one side, and we look now at the main thing I want to talk about today. As part of all of this, I do advocate that people play other games. I advocate that people play other games. I earnestly believe that Games Workshop do a lot of pretty egregious things, but the only way for them to change is for them to have competition. I don't think they'll ever change their pricing policy. I don't think they'll ever change their employee policy. I don't think they'll ever change their marketing strategy. I don't think that they will ever change any of these things so long as they are not in competition with some form of company. Unless there were regulations that were forcing them to behave in a certain way. I gotta be honest, guys, I don't think we're gonna see regulations on Games Workshop anytime soon. I really don't. I really don't. Games Workshop have a monopoly on the wargaming hobby. I think that is it's a very hard statement to contest. I think they have a monopoly. And if it doesn't fit some pedantic version, some dictionary definition of monopoly, which I'm pretty sure it does, but if it doesn't, it's an effective monopoly. In practice, it operates as a monopoly. And we know what that monopoly looks like. We know what a wargaming hobby looks like when it is monopolized by a single company in the form of Games Workshop. It is 1 billion new Warhammer 40k models every single week, usually for one faction. It is all of them contained in a massive box set that you have to purchase, or you can get a single new model, like the Warhammer Open Day reveals, a single new model contained in a huge bundle. And even if released separately, it probably would cost about $50 for a single model, for a single cheap plastic model. Warhammer 40k right now is a bit of a nightmare. Trying to play the game is a little bit of a nightmare. Trying to get into the game is a little bit of a nightmare. It is expensive. It is hard. It is a difficult game to grok. There's a ton of different little rules. There's no universal special rules. It's a very hard game to learn. It is a very unappealing experience. It's a very unappealing experience to most people. And I think this is something that we have to acknowledge, that most people look at Warhammer and they go, not for me. Not for me. Whew. coming to the increasingly unfortunate conclusion, because this is not a conclusion that I want to come to, that Warhammer acts almost like Japanese knotweed. Do you know Japanese knotweed is an invasive species? It is a weed that replaces all other plant life in the area. It is extremely dangerous to get it in your garden. You do not want it in your garden at all. And the reason why I'm coming increasingly to this conclusion is that I have created a channel. I've created a new YouTube channel called Dungeons and Discourse, which is a TTRPG channel. It's a role-playing game channel. Plug. I'm going to plug it right now. You can check it out. It's Dungeons and Discourse. And this means that I've been coming into contact with a lot of people who are into role-playing games exclusively. They're just into role-playing games. They're not really into war games. Well, they're into Dungeons and Dragons, which is a war game, but they don't know that. But it's by the by. They're into role-playing games. What that means is that they're very casual, right? They're very casual about war games. And I'm getting this perspective from them that is a very big shock to me. It's a huge system shock. I'm honestly, I am in fear. I am in fear right now because what I am hearing very increasingly is that they weren't aware of other games. Whenever I talk to them about wargaming, or they say, oh, I checked out your channel Discourse, I didn't know there was other games. I'm like, really? They thought it was just Warhammer. They genuinely thought that Warhammer was the only game that exists in wargaming. That it is just Warhammer. And that scares me. That really, really scares me. It really does. Because Warhammer, as I have said, is one of the most unappealing war games to a new it's a terrible introduction to wargaming. Absolutely terrible. The one thing that Warhammer does well is that it has a retail presence. That is a really good part of Warhammer. But increasingly, that's feeling irrelevant. It's not the same time when I got into this hobby. I got into this hobby by walking into a Games Workshop store. I'm beginning to increasingly think that doesn't happen anymore. That now, it's mostly people get into Warhammer through video games, through these other types of extended media. Or they hear about it because of the general explosion in nerdery. And Warhammer happens to be one of the four horsemen of that apocalypse. It would be good if people could visit wargame shows. There are so many independent games out there. Going to Hammerhead, Partisan, or Salute expose you to so many more games, says Nibbletack. Yes, but I mean, the people who are going to wargame shows are wargamers. This is the thing. The actual concept of wargaming is just a great unknown to anybody outside of this, outside of this sphere. I mean, even there's Warhammer players. There's people who play Warhammer who don't know about games. For 10 years, I had no interest in other games. I thought I had no interest in any other games. None at all. It took a lot to get me to stop playing Warhammer to play another game. And that is a fate that I am concerned is visited upon a lot of other people. Now, the traditional belief that I always had was that basically you got people into Warhammer, right? People came in through video games. They would play like Dawn of War, well, Total War these days, or one of the many mobile games of Warhammer. Or they would play, you know, whatever the latest and greatest is. Dark Crusade, is that still big? So they would play those games. They'd be interested in the lore. Or they watch lore videos, or they would watch, you know, CGI videos online on YouTube from fan content creators. And then they would get interested in the lore, and then they would play the war. They would get interested in the game through the lore. They'd buy some models. They'd be like, this is kind of fun. They would play the Warhammer game. They think, I'm really into wargaming. And then eventually they would get a little bit bored of the game. They would think, well, maybe I'll play a different war game. Maybe I'll try bolt action. And they would play a different game. They go, wow, this is really fun too. And they'd play that other game. That they would move from one game to the other. This was the hope, right? That as Warhammer got bigger, it got more people into wargaming generally. I don't think I believe that anymore. I don't think I believe that. I don't think that's the case. Crypto Kev, thank you very much for the donation. Says GW has the market share. What other games have been around for 50 years and have the viability to normies? That's why we need mouthy advocates. Well, thank you very much there, Crypto Kev, for the donation. Games Workshop have been around a long time, and they do have the market share. They definitely do have the market share, and they are really big. And they have a very strong IP. As I said, the idea was that not people necessarily are like, I want to play with the little wargame boys. the little models. It was that they were like, I love this world, I love this universe, I love this fictitious setting, let me buy the toys, and then from there they get into other war games. But I'm increasingly believing that isn't the case. The people who I have found are most interested or are most susceptible to getting into war games are board gamers these days. They're not Warhammer players, they're board gamers. I try to convince Warhammer players to play a different game, and very often I hear the voice, you know, because I have no interest. That's what they say to me. I have no interest. I want to play Warhammer. I want to be in Warhammer. I want to collect the Space Marines. I want to collect this cool model, right? I think these models are better. Or I can't afford to. I'm playing Warhammer right now. I can't afford to get into that game. Or I've already got to learn one system. I don't want to learn another system. People that I find are mostly more likely to get into war games are board gamers. I think that is the actual funnel. I don't think it's Warhammer. I think when you get into Warhammer, it's a trap. I think that the actual funnel to get into war games is through board games. You go from board games to board game war games into the war game hobby, generally speaking. Because whenever I speak to board gamers about like war games and things, the reason why they don't get into war games, even if they are interested, is usually they cite issues that are specific to Warhammer, not to war games in general. They might say, oh, there's too many books. I don't want to have to buy all these books. Or, oh, aren't the rules very complicated? Or, I've heard that's extremely expensive to get into. I don't think I could get into wargaming. Or, I don't have a lot of hobby time. Or, there's tons of complicated models, very complicated models to pan. Or, there's loads of lore that I'm going to need to keep up with. These are all issues that are specific to Warhammer. Now, it's different war games might have different degrees of these as a kind of a barrier to entry, but most of these problems are specific to Warhammer. But it's this perception. Warhammer has set this perception in the wider casual market about what wargaming is that people now believe that they have taken into. And I suspect that is actually gatekeeping people out of the hobby. That is there's an entire group of people who would be interested in wargaming who are being kept out because of the perception of wargaming from Warhammer. That is my concern. That is an issue that I have. Now, in the past, I've always thought it was this big beacon that was welcoming people in, but I'm beginning to increasingly think that's not the case. That's just not the case. I mean, how many people make the leap from Warhammer to wargaming now? How many? So in some alternative world where Warhammer didn't really quite take on as the war game, if it was some other game or there was a couple of other companies that were all in competition with one another, would the wargaming hobby be even bigger than it is today? Is that the case? And that's the question I want to ask you, Pete. That's what I want to ask you, chat. Is Warhammer actually a net negative for wargaming? Is it a problem? Is it terrible for wargaming? Is this bad? Would we be better off as wargamers if Warhammer didn't have this effect of monopoly? Would this be bad? The Juko7 says, I started in board games, role-playing and war games, and just ended up on war games because I only like the combat phases. Also like the deck building games. Deck building games are fun. Nibbletack says, I came to wargaming through pen and paper RPGs. Small-scale combat encounters expanded to large-scale encounters to large-scale battles. There were a lot of minis attached to RPGs. Yes, I can definitely see that, right? Some of the funnest parts of wargaming to me are the role-playing elements. That's like the funnest part of wargaming to me. I love making my little armies. I love making my characters. I love coming up with a storyline for my models, right? I say storyline, but like a background, right? A context for my army. One of the things that has inspired this recently is I've been playing a lot of bolt action. Or rather, I've been playing Conflict 47, which is basically bolt action, but fun, right? But cool, okay? Sorry, historical people, but I'm not really into pure historical games. I think it's okay. I watch bolt action battle reports, but I prefer a little bit of a twist to my historical games. I like a little bit of a twist, and Conflict 47 has added quite a lovely little twist to a kind of to a World War II game. There's a lot of really cool models, a lot of really awesome ideas, you know, Nazi zombies and things like that. They're really neat. Super soldiers, and you know, you got like a Captain America for the American faction. It's just a lot of fun. And it's a really fun game, but it's basically Warhammer, but it's like Warhammer 2. You know, like bolt action, the rule set was obviously, it was written by Rick Priestley, who wrote the rules to Warhammer, and you can really see that lineage in bolt action's rules. You really can. It's Warhammer 2. It is a better version of kind of Warhammer 3rd or 4th or 5th. Extremely reminiscent of those games. Kudo says board games to strategic war games with tokens to miniature war games. And I'm beginning to suspect, is that the funnel? Have we been wrong all this time? Nibatak says even D&D was initially a war game when it was first written as chainmail. Oscar says start playing Space Hulk, growing up and fell in love with the models. Well, thank you very much for the £2 there donation. Nudok Prime says, what do you think of the Stormbringer AOS magazine? So those are good. I'm not actually 100% certain what the Stormbringer magazine is, but I have to imagine that is like the 40k one, the little magazine that goes out, and then there's miniatures inside it. I think that's awesome. I think that's really cool. I like those magazines. I think they're really, really good. I think they're really good because they emphasize the hobbying part of the war game of Warhammer, right? They're more focused on trying to get people set up with an army, and I think that is really cool. And I don't think we see enough of that kind of outreach from Games Workshop, to be frank. I think that's really cool. Not to mention the fact that the models are priced a little bit more like they should be priced. They're a lot more efficient. They're a lot more valuable, basically. They are priced much more reasonably for your average consumer because they're designed to get kids into the game, and there is an acknowledgement that children don't have a lot of money, generally speaking. So let's price the models pretty cheaply with a subscription basis, and that's why it's been such a huge success. Franco Camachi says, Warhammer is what... Sorry, I butchered your name there. It's Frankie Camacho. Says, Warhammer is what interests me into the wargaming, and a lot of my friends as well. I feel if not for Warhammer going to a bigger audience, a part of that audience would be lost. I think that's probably very reasonable. Like I said, so I oscillate between these kind of positions, back and forth a lot. My traditional perspective was that Warhammer was net good. It was good for the hobby because it got people interested in wargaming in general. It exposed them to the idea of buying miniatures, building miniatures, painting miniatures, and playing with miniatures, right? Like, it's not like, I mean, you've always had historicals, even before Warhammer was more popular. You always had historicals, but historicals are, I'm gonna be honest, their IP isn't that great these days, right? I kind of think of historicals as having a bit of an IP, and I don't think they've got a very strong IP anymore. I think that it was something that historicals were way more popular when there was a lot less choice out there. There is an element of the historical gaming, from what I'm aware, that are really into simulating old battles or accurately simulating kind of old armies and things like that, and that has a lot of appeal. I understand the appeal. Someone who plays a lot of kind of like city builders and 4X games, I understand the appeal of that. However, I don't think that most people are up for like reading historical texts to try and figure out, you know, how they should paint their force. I think that most people want a more accessible experience, hence the success of Bolt Action, which is a historical game that is closer to a Hollywood rendition of World War II rather than an accurate reflection of World War II. And I think that, yeah, sure, Warhammer has definitely been, it definitely has gotten people used to the idea of actually building and painting models and gotten that exposed to a larger casual audience. The problem I have, though, is the people who are getting into those games or are being exposed to wargaming through Warhammer, do they really filter into wargaming? Because yes, I went into other war games, but it took a lot to get me to move into other war games from Warhammer. How many people are being lost there in this funnel, right? How many people are being lost in this funnel? Carl Chaos says, it sets a standard opinion that all war games are too expensive to get into, effectively turning new players away prematurely. That's exactly my issue. Is there this entire invisible group of people who aren't getting into war games expressly because they see the problems with Warhammer, and they, firstly, don't even know that other war games exist, and secondly, if they do know other war games exist, presume that those problems are indicative of the entire hobby? Not to mention, is the entire hobby starting to develop all of the problems that are endemic to Warhammer? At least in terms of the more mainstream games, right? The less indie games. I want to give an example of Star Wars Legion. Prices have increasingly been extremely expensive, going up constantly. Marvel Crisis Protocol, very same thing. Extremely expensive to get into. Now, I'll forgive expensive models from certain companies, from certain smaller indie companies. There's a game, Bushido. The models in that are pretty expensive, but they're individual metal casts. I understand why they're expensive. I get why they're expensive. It's a very small game with a very small population of players. Star Wars Legion, I don't think, doesn't need to be charging the same amount of money as Bushido for a model. There are certain realities to the manufacturing of minis that we do have to acknowledge, but these types of factors are not really as relevant to price increases as you may think. There are plenty of companies out there that are not raising prices. They're eating the prices. They tend to be the bigger ones in the hobby space. Wargames Atlantic, Mantic Games. They're a little bit more resilient to these price increases. They're less independent. Games Workshop, however, actively raised price in anticipation for potential inflation in 10 years' time. They raised price today to try and stave off 10 years worth of inflation. Right? They're preparing for 2032. Let's see here. Noodle says meta LGBT friend, and they just said this is too expensive. I don't think this game is for me. I hear that a lot. I get people basically say that it's just too much money. I couldn't afford to play this. I just couldn't afford to play this. And that's one of the most frustrating things. So I wanna share my experience with Bolt Action that I've recently been playing. I have been playing Bolt Action, and I've collected and finished an entire army for Bolt Action. I have 1,250 points worth of models. I've got more than that, but I've reached that. That's kind of the standard. That's like your 2,000 points in Bolt Action. I have so many infantry. I've got 30 infantry squads. I have a commander. I have a mortar. I have a machine gun. I have a tank. I have a flak track with an auto gun. I've got an army, right? I've got a proper army. This army cost me, I was doing the math for it earlier, £85. It's $100, basically. Full army, done, completed. Don't need to buy any more. That's me finished. I have completed my Bolt Action collection for $100. That would get you the part of the way towards a 500-point force in Warhammer. You wouldn't even have bought your books for that amount of money with Warhammer. You haven't even gotten started. Like, Warhammer is expensive. Warhammer is incredibly expensive. Absolutely expensive. And of course it keeps people out. How many people do you know that are interested in Warhammer the setting but don't play Warhammer the game because, well, it's just a little bit too much money? I know a lot personally. Katie Walker says, plus point, if historical schemes is armies can't generally be used in numerous rules. That is very true. I've got this Bolt Action army now, and I'm thinking, hey, I could use this in all sorts of games, right? Maybe not Flames of War, that's a 50mm game, but I could use any sort of 28mm game, I could use it, right? I could use it there. Although maybe not necessarily, because I built my force to be for Conflict 47, so they've all got blood on them and stuff. They're all zombified. My Germans have all got loads of like blood and things like that all over them. They're like a chaos army at this stage. Nibble Tax says historical war games are also a lot cheaper. You can get full armies for the same price you pay for a GW book. Yeah, exactly. Daniel Phillips says GW's cost of entry puts people off wargaming. Core rulebook, starter set, codex, a small army costs more than a new PlayStation. It's a very large amount of money to put in. I want to tell you, but it's not just that, right? I've heard this. I'm not sure how much I agree with this. This is pretty spicy. But I have heard somebody who will go nameless say that one of the greatest tricks that Games Workshop ever pulled was that they made the game so hard to get into, so convoluted to get into. They've made it so expensive. You need so many books. You need so many miniatures. That this is the greatest trick they ever pulled. It means that nobody actually plays the game of Warhammer 40k and discovers just how bad it is what is their opinion. That's not my opinion. That's their opinion. This anonymous commenter, shall we say. That Warhammer 40k is such a bad game that the biggest trick Games Workshop ever pulled was making it too hard to play. Which, I don't necessarily agree with that. But I do see how Warhammer 40k is an extremely convoluted game compared to a lot of other games. It's extremely convoluted. It's very hard. And I recently played a game of Conflict 47 with a friend. And I've talked about this friend before on the channel. I've mentioned it before. I actually told his origin story on the channel before. During my my 10,000 subscriber special. It was 2 years ago now. A year ago, maybe. So this friend of mine, they got into Warhammer Fantasy. The old school Warhammer Fantasy. They got into Warhammer Fantasy at the same time as me. So this must have been around 2007 or so. They got into Warhammer Fantasy. I got into Empire. They got into Bretonnia. We both started collecting an army. They built a classic Bretonian army, had a bunch of peasants, had a bunch of knights, but mostly focused on knights. They were playing Bretonnia. I had an Empire gunline army. I had mostly riflemen, mortars, cannons, and like a general and things like that. First turn, I won initiative. I opened fire on his knights with my outriders, with my riflemen, and I killed his entire force. Or enough to it no longer mattered. He had a couple of peasants left. I destroyed him. In an alpha strike. It was very unfun. And he put down the measuring tape, and he has never played another game of Warhammer ever again. Or any war game. He's never played a single war game ever. That was enough for him. The game completely, he spent all this time building this first, spent all this money buying in, got completely wiped out. Hated it. Detests the game ever since. And on Saturday, I managed to convince him to play a game of Conflict 47, part of a big team game. I had me and myself, a bunch of friends, the other week. We played a big team game, Soviets versus the British. We had this massive game, and he loved it. And he was surprised. He said, wow, this was actually really fun. I actually really enjoyed this game. And now he's talking about starting an army in it. He's gonna collect Americans in this game. And that was incredible for me. I was genuinely surprised. I thought he was going to hate it. I thought he was going to hate it. But what it turns out is that he doesn't hate war games. He actually really likes RTS games. He likes strategy games. He just did like Warhammer. And how many people have had that experience with Warhammer today that aren't playing it? I mean, Warhammer has lots of big gameplay problems. There was a video from Miniac recently on Age of Sigmar, and basically, in his opinion, why it's trash. Is his opinion that it's a pretty trash game. He still plays it because he likes the models, but that the game itself is pretty trash. And he made some very compelling points in this video. Now, I don't play Age of Sigmar very often. I play 40k more often. But I mean, the both of them have the same issues, right? The same kind of turn structure that hasn't changed in 30, 40 years. Crypto Kev, thank you very much for the $5 donation. Says, in my opinion, it is a bad game due to power creep, trying to always make the new mini line the most hot freshness for the wheels. Strategies are now top trumps. Thank you very much for the donation there, Crypto Kev. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, so obviously there is a whole business element as to why Warhammer isn't that great. I mean, I am on record as think it's not that incredible a game. I don't think it's a bad game per se. I think it's a middling game. I don't think it's like really bad. There's people out there who really detest Warhammer. I'm not one of them. I think it's okay. I play it sometimes. I have fun, but it usually tends to be the case that I'm kind of trying to claw fun from it, right? That I'm making my own fun from it. And I find 9th edition to be specifically egregious, and I have hopes for 10th edition. But I think you're right, Crypto Kev, in that there's a lot of business elements that make the game less fun. I mean, the entire codex system, I think, makes the game less fun. The way that the rules are released, the way that models are released, I think makes the game less fun. Kudo says, would agree that GW managed to keep people from actually playing too much so that they released a new game with the same IP before people discover how bad it was, and most people just keep painting instead. I mean, I think it's pretty indicative of a bad rule set whenever like 95% of people that are who are collecting the miniatures to play your game never actually play a game. I think that's a pretty big feeling of your game system. If people aren't being compelled to play it. Right? Like, do we ever actually critically think about this, like, number? Beyond just, oh, well, you know, it's hard to get time on the table. Like, do we ever actually think about this number, right? That, like, at least 95% of people who collect Warhammer models just never play the game. And I've done some videos on this topic. But when we critically think about that, is that not a feeling of the game? That isn't just because people don't have time. Right, there is a reason. It is a hard game to get onto the table. I find Warhammer, I was gonna say 40k, but it's true of Age of Sigmar too. I find it very hard to get them onto the table. I really do, because every single time I go to play a game, I'm like, oh, wait a second, hasn't this been updated, or is there like a new rule set out that I'm missing? Has there been a new book released in the last 3 months? And you know what? 9 times out of 10 there has. That's the thing. 9 times out of 10 there actually has been like a new book released that has kind of changed the rules of my army. I think most people would just want to play a game every so often, like every couple of months. It makes it hard. Discourse redeemed the gamer, says Samuel Roberts. I did. It was so cool. It was genuinely really fun. It was really awesome to see someone get really excited about a game that had hated wargaming. Detested it. Absolutely hated it. Would never play it. Finally strong-armed trying a game other than Warhammer. And we're like, oh my god, this is incredible. This is so much fun. You know? And I'm thinking, I was like, man, there are so many skirmish games I think you'd love. There's so many skirmish games I think you'd adore, you know? Like Lunar or something. I think you'd really dig it. Don't alpha him off the table game, says Leonard Smith. Well, firstly, Leonard, I was pretty young. And to be perfectly frank, I was playing the Empire in a way that was encouraged by the book. I don't think that alpha striking someone off the table isn't a bad... alpha striking someone off the table is not a player problem. That is a game problem. If a game allows you to knock somebody out in turn 0, just knock them off the table, give them a chance. That is a bad game. That is bad game design. It truly is. It should not be possible to absolutely wipe the floor with your opponent in a single turn. That is a bad game. I can't see it any other way else. Because if you can alpha strike someone off the table, then that is how many people will play. Because they want to win a game. In an adversarial game, it is totally reasonable to want to try and win it. Try and beat your opponent in this game. To try and claw victory from your opponent. And if a game doesn't provide a rule set that allows you to play in that spirit, if it's an adversarial game, and it does not allow you to play in that spirit without making the game a genuinely unfun experience, well then, that's a problem with the game. That's not a problem with players. No game should allow you to do that. That's bad game design. That should be caught in play testing. That's like 101. That's like the basics of game design. If this was a board game, it would be laughed out of the marketplace. If it did, like honestly, if it was a board game, it would be laughed out of the marketplace. People would say, oh, it's a bad game. That's what they'd say. Oh, don't play that game. The way that if you play as like the Xenos player, you know, if you play as the purple player and you build like this egg sack, you know, the thing that the game encourages you to build, it just beats the Marines. They don't get they just can't beat it. They just can't win afterwards. They just lose. So, you know, you wouldn't have people saying, well then just don't build the egg sack. No, you would have people saying, this is a bad game. Right? And at the time in Warhammer Fantasy, you were absolutely encouraged to play the Empire faction as a gun line because their guns were incredible. And I like that kind of Napoleonic warfare where you have all your guys in a rifle line lined up and firing at your opponent. I thought it was really cool. I like gunline armies. I do. I like gunline armies. And they're very popular. Zimsam says, conflict goes faster with my friends in Age of Sigmar 40k. It's so convoluted with all you can do. They don't do nothing while counter compared to BA's rules that goes more organically. Really? So with Conflict 47, we play it mostly, like, to be perfectly honest, my force consists mostly of a bolt action force. That's just been themed to have a mad scientist leading it. That's my Conflict 47 force. I've got a few friends, they've bought the mechs, they're building the mechs and things like that. But I have some shock troopers is kind of the extent of the madness that I have. Though I do want to buy some zombies. I'm gonna buy some zombies. Pig says just don't table him a second time. Thing is, I couldn't in bolt action. I couldn't table him. Not that I wouldn't be aware how to do so. I think the closest chance I'd have to do would be like preparatory barrage him and get roll a 6 with every single blast. But bolt action has been made by Rick Priestley, and I think in a lot of ways it has improved on that core Warhammer design. For sure. I mean, we've gone from a game where it's you go, I go, which is one of the worst designs of activation systems that has ever been invented, to a super innovative dice-based system where you pluck colored dice out of a bag. And whatever colored dice you pull, that's the person who activates a unit. I think it's an incredibly innovative way to use an activation system. Jose says there are just too many people who are afraid of not playing Warhammer just because they've invested so much money. Hey pal, you can use those models you have in other games. Really. This is why I really like one-page rules. This is why I've always been a big advocate for one-page rules. I think it gets people into the wider ecosystem of wargaming. It helps make it easier for that funnel, right? For those Warhammer players, that funnel of Warhammer players to get turned into wargamers. Wargamers, right? An appropriator says bolt action is such a good game. Have started my German. I'm not gonna pronounce that. Here is Gruppen Nord Army. Yeah. Xenos Rampant says Stu Rat. I want to play it. I want to try it, but I haven't played it yet. I haven't played it. Pig says, is that egg sack a real thing? I'm really out of touch for 40k now. Unfortunately not enough egg sacks. Daniel Phillips says, I've seen turn 1 wins in 40k many times. I've only seen it once in a non-GW game. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, like, turn 1 wins in 40k I think are still pretty exceptional. They're still pretty rare. But they're not as rare as you would like them to be, I think. Oh, thank you very much for the donation there. Scython says, that was me in February 2020. First game, alpha off the table. My best friend brought me back to it against my bad first impressions. Cheers, Discourse. Thank you very much, Scython. I've spoken to so many new players. Honestly, it seems to be like a curse of the new player. They just get alpha off the table because they don't know to like hide their models behind terrain. They're like, I'm playing Space Marines. I'm the big strong guy. Surely I can take a couple of blasts from these puny guardsmen. And then turn 1 happens. The shooting phase of the Imperial Guard slaughters them, knocks them all off the table. Space Marines are all dead. They're like, what? But the fantasy of my army is that I'm really big, strong, tough guys with really cool armor. I should be able to like stride across the battlefield. It's like, no, this is Warhammer. Unfortunately, all of my guns get to shoot all at once at at each unit that you have. I get to choose what will die. Yeah. Which is part of the problem with Warhammer, I've always suspected. I think they've gotten better over time at this. Warhammer's problem has historically been that the ways that units interact with the table has been mostly in a killy fashion, right? That armies tend to be like designed to kill things as efficiently as possible, as effectively as possible. There's no like, there's no pinning system, right? There's no other system that you interact with. I think they've gotten a little bit better with this over time. But it's still kind of there. Still, whenever you look at a unit in Warhammer, your first thought is like, how will this murder things? Will this murder things better than this guy over here murdering things? But they have begun to bring in buffs and things. That's why I kind of always liked the Guard. It felt like the Guard were sort of had a little bit more tactical decision making in terms of what orders and things to give people. It's just a pity that it seems like Games Workshop are so preoccupied with the stratagem system, trying to add that depth, which I think has been a bit of a what's the opposite of a fan favorite? What's the opposite of a fan favorite? One Page Rules is fantastic and certainly earned GW more money since 1988 to it. I totally agree. One Page Rules has undoubtedly earned Games Workshop a lot more money. Games Workshop have sold models on the back of the One Page Rules rule set 100%. There are people who are playing the One Page Rules rule set right now with Games Workshop minis that would not have bought them were it not for that game system. Sophie Bear 1917 says, love One Page Rules, 3D printer go burr, running all 4 plates of Ratman today. Very nice, very nice. I hope you enjoy. Oscar says, I feel like the company is too hostile to creative and talented players and have started enforcing uniformity. I mean, they're not just hostile to talented players. They're hostile to their employees. They're hostile to play testers. They're basically hostile to everybody that isn't an executive suit at the top, right? They're pretty much hostile to everybody, I think, Games Workshop. If you can believe such a thing, my opinion of Games Workshop has increasingly gotten lower and lower as time has gone on. Y'all thought I was bad? Y'all thought I was bad like a year ago, 2 years ago? The more I have been exposed to the inner workings of Games Workshop, the more stories I hear from employees, the more I grow to hate that company. They are a bad company that is badly run. You know, and that isn't necessarily that's not necessarily me indicting. What would be the word for it? Indicting their games, but that is the company itself. I think is very poorly run. I used to offer suggestions in a lot more of an earnest kind of like, this would be a nice way to improve things. These days, it's more like, they need to change their entire business model, guys. I don't think any tweaks are gonna fix this one. I really don't. Pixie says the Shin One Piece Rules aren't doing hard plastic minis yet. You should keep an eye out in the future. I think. I don't think we're far off. I don't think we're far off cheap plastic minis for One Piece Rules. I don't say that with any information. I don't have any inside information, but I do not think that we're far off. I do not think that we're far off. Craig Bidoff says, I've never met or spoken to somebody who plays One Piece rules. They just seem like something YouTubers push to sell their STL files. So I don't have any STL files, Craig. I just don't have any STL files. I just don't have the time to get one created, or the money, really, I guess, to invest in it, to hire a sculptor, because they're expensive to hire if you pay them properly. But yeah, I One Piece rules. As someone who belongs to a gaming club, I have seen people playing One Piece rules. I've seen people talking about One Piece rules. I've seen people advocating to play One Piece rules and convincing people who play Warhammer to get into One Piece rules, or saying things like, "You might not like Warhammer, but you might like this game." That's a pretty classic attack line I see people whenever they're trying to advocate to play these other games. Noodle says, yeah, Peachy and others say the inner workings is a bunch of abusive schoolboys. I do not disagree. Cryptic, thank you very much for the $2. Says top 3 non-games workshop war games and why. That is too hard a question. I don't have one yet. Currently I am doing a series for patrons where I review every single miniature war game that has ever been created, that has ever existed. So once a month, I will come out with a video doing that. In fact, this month's was Conflict 47. So patrons get access to those bonus videos, one a month. And as part of that, I've been like rating them. I've been giving them a number. Now, that's kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's more just like a very vague kind of number. You know, like a 7 out of 10. Because basically, I don't really think that you can objectively measure games in that way. You know, like, and my feeling about games will change over time. My perspective and position on games will change over time. However, right now, if you were to hold a gun to my head and tell me to name my top 3 right now, I'm gonna be honest, up there in that list is Conflict 47. Now, that said, there are little niggles with the system that I have, or even that I can see coming up on the horizon. I'm kind of in that honeymoon period, you know, whenever you buy into a new game and you get into a new game, you start playing games. You know that honeymoon period? I'm in that honeymoon period. So right now, it's maybe getting a little bit of it's reflecting a little bit of glow that maybe is a little bit unwarranted. But I understand why Bolt Action is the most popular historical war game. I really do get it. And anybody who is kind of curious about it, I genuinely suggest you have a look at it, because it is a really fun game and it's very cheap and easy to get into. I really do recommend the game. So it's definitely in the top 3. I would put Carnivale up there as well. It is a game that I keep coming back to over and over and over again. Carnivale, I just love it. It is a game set in Venice during the Napoleonic era. It's an alt history setting where things have gone wrong and monsters and mutants and things like that are coming down and magic has returned to the world. There's a lot of really awesome factions. I play the Catholic Church. Yes, that is right. I play the Catholic Church. I even have altar boys in my war band. And we preach the holy word of God and also use magic to make sure no one else is allowed to use magic, and we burn them. And I have a lot of fun with it. So Carnivale would definitely be there. Number 3. Ooh, that is tougher. I'm very partial to Lunar. Very, very partial to Lunar. But I'm not sure if it would be in my top 3, honestly. That's a tough one. I'm not sure which one would take up my top 3. I'm not sure which one would take up my top 3. Icky Devil says, here late, all I'm going to say is I've only paid for Warhammer minis when they're on sale or given to me from the game store owner. They're very expensive. They're very expensive minis. As I was saying earlier before you arrived, that I recently purchased a Bolt Action army, and it cost me about as much as a box of Space Marines, 2 boxes of Space Marines, and I have a full army. I mean, to put it this way, right? To get 30 infantrymen, you pay £30. So what's that, $40, $50? You pay $50, you get 30 guys. Hard plastic, or as I like to call it, cheap plastic. Hellcat makes a really good point. Really, really good point. Warhammer players have a thing where casual play is still somewhat competitive and use all of their rules, while a new player still hasn't remembered all of their 20 pages before units, and they don't hold back. I think that is totally true. I think casual play has grown to encompass every single new errata and new rule. The thing is, though, is that what I find is that most casual games, people just want to open their codex and use that. They don't want to like use all the erratas. They don't want to use like all of the new stuff. They just want to use like their codex, which makes sense to me, right? Like I've spent like £30, $50 on this little book that apparently has all the rules for my army. I just want to open that book and be able to refer to it from that book. 100%, I totally get it. Ben William asks, what's a good way to dive into 40k lore besides novels? I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I mean, I'm not like a big fan of the Warhammer novels, right? Like I don't really read them. But then Twitter and Reddit and stuff like that has like absolutely destroyed my attention span. So what I would recommend is honestly just YouTube videos. I mean, most of them are just... No, I'm not gonna... I'm not gonna be that spicy. I'm not gonna be that spicy. But yeah, I would recommend just Warhammer YouTube. I forgot I was on camera there for a second. Warhammer lore YouTubers, I think I'd recommend. There's some really good ones out there. But apart from that, I mean, if you're into lore, honestly, the video games. If you're into video games, I just play the video games. The codices are pretty good primers as well. If you're interested in an army, you buy the codex. It's pretty good lore primer. I actually think that should be their real purpose. I think codexes should only exist for lore, really. Jose says, in shops who need to sell Warhammer, it's difficult to see 1 rules. It's understandable, but in clubs and at home, there's no reason to not try, except for fanboys. Ooh. So Discourse, when Darklands 2nd Edition review, says Zimzam. Darklands, I'm not aware of this game, Zimzam. Darklands, I don't know about this. Tell me more. Darklands sounds very interesting. The Arcane Gearsmith says, I run a 3D store on Etsy, all fantasy models. Well, good. Nice one, Arcane Gearsmith. Nice one. There you go, guys. You're interested in fantasy models, might want to check out Arcane Gamesmith. Or Gearsmith. Sorry. Some plug. Butchering the name. Mythic Games look so good. Thought about Kings of War, says Inappropriator. I like Mythic Games' stuff. I wish that they had a more coherent art direction, though. Some of their models are very expensive, too. Specifically the resin and metal ones. And I also have a little bit of an issue with the... Some of the models don't look that great. Some of them do look good. Like, there's the Halfling range. I love the Halfling range from Mantic. But there are other older models, especially, that aren't that great. 2+ Tough. Thank you very much for the donation. 2+ Tough, of course, everybody here, I'm sure, knows 2+ Tough. He's an awesome YouTuber. Says, Conquest by Parabellum. Carnivale by TT Combat. This is where the best kind of gaming is. Can't stay. Happy streaming. Well, thank you very much, 2+ Tough. Thank you very much. Conquest by Parabellum. I have played a couple of demo games of that. I'm still, like, not too sure about it. The game is a little bit pricey for me. It's a little bit pricey for me. The models are a little bit bigger, though. And Carnivale is awesome. I absolutely love Carnivale. I think it's such an underrated gem. Although I'm almost 100% certain that I caused TT Combat to run out of stock of their starter box. Because once I started talking about it, it seems like their starter box stock... It's really hard to get now. I'm not apologizing for that, though, because it's a fun game. I'm glad more people are getting into it. Daniel Phillips says, on that box of 30 guys is plenty of spare weapons, so you have some choice. When was the last time a Games Workshop set out extra weapons? Here's the thing, right? So I bought the army group support for my German army. It's £22. It cost, it doesn't have a lot of models. It's got a medium machine gun, mortar team, has a commander, has like a couple of other extra little dudes like to form the commander squad, all metal. Not that great value for Warlord. But all of those models could have been made using just one of that box of 30 guys. I could have just done that because there's a head for an officer. You have the little peaked cap, like there's a head in that box set. There's 3-4 heads in that box set where I can get the 30 guys. There's a medium machine gun in there too. There's a light mortar that I could just approximate as a medium mortar. I have all the stuff that I need to build a command squad inside that box of normal infantry because there's so many options and so many like variations on stuff. You don't get that. I mean, you're totally right. You don't get that in Warhammer anymore. In fact, that's increasingly the opposite of the way things are going now. You've got to buy the box and that's it. Rising Nip says top 3 Carnivale, Star Wars Legion, and Kings of War Armada for something a little bit different. I am a big fan. So I do criticize the pricing of Star Wars Legion, but Rising Nip, I gotta agree with him. Star Wars Legion is a really fun game. I really like Star Wars Legion. I think it's really fun. I really like it. I think it's a good game. I'd say that's a better introduction to wargaming, for sure. Jose says Mythic games are good and their plastic models are getting better. I do think that their models are definitely getting better. Definitely. And I can't wait to see, what they come out with. Resident says, hoping for good things from the upcoming Star Wars Shatter point from AMG. I'm a little bit nervous about it. I'm not really the biggest fan of the sculpts for Marvel Crisis Protocol, and it looks like Star Wars Shatter point is kind of going down that AMG style where they're very over the top and very cartoony. It's just not personally, it just doesn't grok with me. Hopefully the gameplay is good, but from what I've heard, it hasn't like... I'll say this much. I'm very curious to play it. It sounds like they're doing a lot of innovative things, which might not necessarily be good. For example, they're getting rid of turn structure, and you have to activate your units by drawing them in a deck of cards. It tells you what unit you can activate. So I'm not sure about that. That doesn't sound good to me. But I want to play it, obviously. I want to withhold judgment before playing it. God, yeah, Warhammer supplements in White Dwarf. That is a nightmare. I did a video on that a long time ago, and it may be worth revisiting. That is an absolute nightmare. The idea of putting rules inside a magazine that is sold for a single month is just insane to me. And then whenever you put it up on your digital archive of those magazines and actively remove the rules from those magazines, like go through and strip them out before uploading them, it's insane. Absolutely insane. Emery Killiam says, also Common 47 has the problem that basic World War II vehicles are often better for their points than their super science replacement. Like I said, Emery, so I'm still very early on. I'm in that little honeymoon period. I haven't like noticed these issues just yet. Although I will say that mechs are very good. Like I haven't encountered the mechs. They're very good. They may not be like the most efficient, but they're very good. The whole fact that they don't have armor on their sides or rear, right? Like the armor is consistent all the way around them seems really, really good. Like normally tanks, you know, you shoot them in the side or the rear, and they're much easier to destroy. But mechs have got the same armor value the entire way around them. That seems really, really good. Makes them much more mobile and aggressive, and I kind of like that. I kind of dig that. Kitty Walker says the Song of Ice and Fire is good, sort of halfway point between a war game and a board game. Yes, exactly, it is. Song of Ice and Fire is a very accessible product. They sell starter sets for every single army. Every single army has a starter set, and that starter set comes with the deck of cards that you need to play that faction. It has a bunch of the heroes that you're going to need. It has four squads of infantry, basically like almost an army. You're like one squad away from being done collecting. You're done. It comes with all the counter sets. It comes with the terrain. It comes with everything you need. And it's like $50 or like $70, I guess now. It's like £50 I bought mine for. I think they're £100 RRP, but I frequently get, like, I see them all the time for £50. I bought like 2 sets. I bought the Baratheon starter army, and I bought the Wildlings. Oh, the Wildlings. I bought the Wildlings starter army. And yeah, like you say, it's very much a cross between a war game and a board game. It's like very close to being a board game, but it's still got all the models, still beautiful sculpts, though the plastic is PVC, which I'm not really a big fan of. But I didn't paint them. I just didn't paint them. They're all colored plastic, so it kind of feels almost like a board game, but it's a fun game. I really like it. Darth Cracker says 248 people watching, 18 likes. What the hell? Come on, people. Yeah, people don't like this topic, I don't think. The like to dislike ratio isn't that hot for me right now. It's been a while since I've talked about something like this, where, you know, I've been a little bit controversial, shall we say. Zimsam says Darklands from Mears Miniatures played on a 4-foot by 4-foot table, play with 10-sided dice with initiative rolls. Very interesting. This sounds interesting. Oscar says, hopefully played The Last War and the Silver Bayonet. Oh my goodness, Silver Bayonet. There is a game that I need to play more of, because what a game that speaks to my heart. What a style. For those who don't know, Silver Bayonet is a Napoleonic game that is alt history and is a horror game where you play as a squad of like agents that works for one of the Napoleonic powers, like France or England or Prussia. And you play this squad, and you're investigating some sort of monstrosity or some sort of fairy folk, or like basically like a vampire or something. And this monster is on the board, and you're trying to kill him, but your opponent is playing a rival nation. So they're playing like, say you're playing as like an English group trying to go in and kill this vampire. Your opponent is playing like the Prussians, and they're basically trying to kill him first. And you're in this conflict with one another. It's very cool. It's very neat. It's a very interesting game. I want to play more of it. I really do. It's from Joe McCullough. It's an iteration on like Frostgrave. Jeez, I forgot the name Frostgrave for a moment there. Oh my goodness. Let's see here. Cole says Infinity and Malifaux are great fun and both have free rules, which is so refreshing after coming from GW. Infinity and Malifaux are some of the biggest skirmish games I hear talked about a lot. Malifaux less so these days, actually. I don't hear Malifaux talked about as much. They should be talked about all the time. But it feels like as there has been more skirmish games coming out, Malifaux has increasingly become just a little bit less talked about, at least in the spaces that I belong to. But it's a game that I want to try. I think the lack of dice kind of hurts it a little bit. I think people are a little bit like wary about a game that doesn't have dice. But I really want to try it because that type of variance and things like that. I know it's something people don't really care about, but the game design elements. But for me, I find it very interesting, the idea of like probabilities and the randomization of these actions that characters can do, and how a deck of cards, you know, you're increasingly making certain actions more likely, you know, certain results more likely, because once you get a card, you discard it. That's no longer in the deck. Whereas with a die, if you're rolling a die, you're always rolling it, and it can always come up with 6, right? You can always roll another 6. Deck of cards, once you pull, you know, the last jack from the deck, that's it, gone forever. And I think that's a really interesting gameplay space. Warlords of Erowin, says Simsam, is nice too. Yeah, it took me the longest time. Guys, so those who have heard of Warlords of Erowin, and you're like, why the hell is this game called Erowin? Spell Erowin backwards and you'll discover why. And it took me like the longest time to figure that out. It really did. I was like, oh my god, of course. Because for me, I was always like, why is it called Erowin? Why is it called Warlords of Erowin? It's such a random name. But Warlords of Erowin is interesting. I'm a big fan of Mythic Americas, which is like a kind of a modded version of Warlords of Erowin. I'm a big fan of Mythic Americas, and I wish that game was more popular, but I understand why it's not. It's very expensive, and it's very niche subject matter. I just love those kind of pre-Columbian American societies. I think they're very fascinating, very interesting. You know, and it had a lot of potential to be a really fun game, but I just don't really hear it getting pushed anymore. It doesn't seem to have taken off, which is a bit of a pity. Some of my favorite times in my life was playing like games like Age of Mythology and Age of Empires, and getting exposed to all these historical things and getting exposed to all this information about these different cultures and peoples, and finding out about them through the medium of this game, you know, because they used to have these Age of Empires and Age of Mythology. They used to have this like encyclopedia section, right? So like these were RTS games in like the early 2000s. And you play as these different civilizations. It was a video game. And they would have this encyclopedia section. And you'd click the units. And it would give you the history of the unit. It would tell you about the unit. And you'd be like, oh! And it was really cool. And I was young at the time. This exposed me to all this world of information. And that created this love of history in me. And I think that war games have a similar potential. I just don't think that they're being taken advantage of. And Mythic Americas is one of those games that genuinely was exposing me to these cultures that I wasn't aware of, and I just find them so fascinating, you know. You had Aztec Maya, for example. It was just really, really cool, and unfortunately the game just doesn't seem to be taken off at all, which is kind of sad. Malifaux cards were very hard to read, says Katie Walker. I'm sorry to hear that. Lazy Money Pithy says, could you DM me on Discord at some point, please? If I get a chance. I get a lot of DMs. Best place to contact me is on my email, which is discoursminiatures@gmail.com. It's the best place to reach me. Zombie Aztecs for Blood and Plunder, says Crypto Kev. Oh yeah. Okay, so Blood and Plunder is a pirate game. It is a very historical game. The creators of the game, firstly, sent me out a box set of that starter set. I just saw Modeling for Advantage on box set. I want it. I did actually buy it, but it still hasn't arrived. So like, where's my box set, guys? Where's my box set? I want my big starter set. However, I packed it like 2 years ago. I'm like, where's this game? But I'm really looking forward to getting it. I really want to play it. It looks really fun. But it's a pure historical game. And they seem very, very proud of the historical kind of side of things. It seems very well researched. It seems super, like, in-depth in terms of the lore. And, I think they need to do more mythological stuff. I think that, honestly, this is a problem that the historical games have. Okay. Oh, boy, are we gonna get spicy? Are we gonna upset the historical players here, guys? Should I do this? Should I really annoy a lot of historical players? Because the historical miniature section, it's struggling for new blood. What is it? It's the classic. Is it graying out? Is the question about historical stuff. Is it graying out? Crypto Kev, Thank you very much for the $5 donation. Says, Blood and Plunder will not be 100% historical when I get it. Okay, go for it. We are Justice Cleo. Yeah, Crypto Campus is to hit on the topic. Okay, so here's the deal, right? There's this like discussion in the historical community. That is it gray now, right? People aren't going into historicals. And I think that for some extent it is. I just don't see historicals talked about as much anymore. It doesn't matter that they're cheaper, you know. I think ultimately the subject matter just is of less interest to people than fantasy and sci-fi. I think historical games should be doing more stuff like Joe McCullough did with Silver Bayonet, where you take a historical context or Carnivale and you add this vibe, this fantasy or this mythology on top of it. And I think it makes for a more interesting game. It's like the old classic Total War games. Rome Total War, Medieval Total War, Empire Total War, all fun games. But ultimately we're like dude with a rock hitting dude with a stick, right? Like this was the asymmetry that was available. And then what happens? Total War Warhammer comes out. Something you're adding monsters and flying machines and like tanks, and there's all this like wildness, and it creates this way more interesting gameplay because you have all these different interactions. You've just got a lot more scope for gameplay, and I genuinely think there should be more historical games in this vein. I really do. Now, I'm not saying take away, I'm not saying get rid of historical games. Napoleonics have their place, you know, like medieval, like warfare games have their place, but by God, I want more alt history games. I want to play Blood and Plunder. I want to play a pirate game, but I want to fight a kraken. I don't want to just do ship-to-ship combat. I want there to be krakens. I want there to be Draugr rising from the deep. I want to have my pirate dudes fighting skeleton warriors. I want my cowboy game to have skeleton cowboys, right? Like I want all this. I want werewolves. I want monsters. My favorite Age of Empires game was Age of Mythology because I love that they took these mythologies, they added minotaurs into the Greek faction and stuff. I think it would be really, really cool. Really, really cool. Larkbeard says, Turn of 28 is historical, right? Well, sort of. From a certain point of view. I love alt history games. I'm just a big fan of alt history games. Now, tomorrow, if the video is ready, which it might not be, so maybe next week, early next week, there will be another video that I will be releasing that will be talking about a certain... I'm not going to spoil it, but it's going to be talking about something that we don't see enough of, I think, in the wargaming hobby. In the wargaming hobby. But like, this is what I loved about Mythic Americas. It was like they're taking real life places, real life peoples and cultures, and they're adding their mythology into the game, and it makes it this really awesome. Like, so for example, the Eastern Confederacy of kind of like Native Americans, where they had like Bigfoot, right? They had like Bigfoot, and they had eagle warriors and stuff, and I thought that was really cool. I thought it was really, really neat. The Aztecs had zombies. Right, there was these elements of their mythology. They had these weird, they called the sisters, these weird creatures that I'd never seen before. It was just really, really cool. And there was so much scope for this. Like, where's my ancient Greek battle, right? Like, that has minotaurs and stuff. Why is there so many Roman games where you just play Romans fighting each other? Like, what the hell's all my monsters and stuff? Sasquatch, yeah, that's it, Efren. Yeah. Efren says only the chief can ride the Thunderbird. Yeah, the Thunderbird, right? That was so cool. That was so cool. Kimi Hikaru says, try Debellus Antiquitatis. It is very light historical. Mini games, quick and tactical. I do like my games to be quick and tactical. Call of Duty Meet Godzilla, says Steve McGrath. Quantum Sheet says, I love Greek mythology and sci-fi, so Lords of Hellas really spoke to me. Mythological with a sci-fi twist. I've heard of Lords of Hellas, but I've never actually played it. Kitty Walker says, think for historical 40k keeps itself too separate. They enable many to even be aware of historical games to try them out. I do think so. I think that obviously, I think Bolt Action has done more to get people into historical war games than Warhammer ever has. Right? Like, I think that's just like, I don't think how anyone could argue against that. I think Bolt Action has been the biggest introduction to historical gaming for most people. Much more so than Warhammer, for sure. There is lots of Bolt Action around, as Larkbeard says. Yeah. Inappropriator says, I think the GW squeeze as most money as possible out of their IPs, and in the moment they will not pay out anymore. The CEO will sell it to someone like Bandai. I don't see the Warhammer IP going away. Like, I don't see it ever not paying. In fact, if anything, I think it's going to increasingly make more money in the future. And as time goes on, I think the Games Workshop will... So there's like these kind of... There's a perspective in the hobby. The Games Workshop don't care about the wargaming element of their business. The Games Workshop basically are like, okay, we have this game about Space Marines and space. And that's good. People like it. Let's sell the IP loads. And then they push, the IP loads and they sell it to video games for, for royalties. And so people are like, Games Workshop is getting out of wargaming and going into the IP business. And to a certain extent, that is true. They're obviously pushing the IP much more than just the wargaming. However, I don't think that means that they're going to stop the wargaming element either, right? They're going to do both. It's just marketing and selling their IP to like video game companies is just so much easier than building a new model. But I don't think they're ever going to stop building the models either, right? I just think that the IP element is just increasingly becoming a much bigger part of their business strategy, and that is resulting in things that I think are bad for the wargaming element, but I don't think they're ever going to get out of the wargaming stuff. I think that is I think that's like a misunderstanding of how their business works. They're they own a monopoly in the wargaming hobby. They're not going to stop that anytime soon. Like, why would you give that up? It makes them so much cash. Guys, they're making like $1 billion selling toy plastic soldiers that they make for like nothing. It's like they make these miniatures. I have stopped. I'm no longer calling it hard plastic. It is now being called cheap plastic. That is what hard plastic is to me. It's cheap plastic. It's so cheap to make. The costs are insignificant. The costs of employees to design miniatures, insignificant. To the end result, how much they're selling it for? Nothing. Nothing at all. They're never going to give it out. They've stumbled into a gold mine. Kid Walker says, for ancients, elephants are monsters, basically when they get spooked and take out their side. Yeah, sure. But like, they're not really though. Like I get the perspective that elephants are like these big beasts of war, but they're not a minotaur. I want a minotaur. Give me some minotaurs. Yeah. Hell yeah. Mr. Incompetent Gamer says, what historical wargame would not be improved by a predator stalking around on the hunt for worthy trophies? I 100% agree. And this is why I really want to see more rule sets like Conflict 47. Conflict 47 is an expansion for bolt action that adds a bunch of super science, exotic stuff, Tesla guns, zombies, genetic experiments, guys with jetpacks, like all mech suits, like all this sort of stuff to a historical game. And the really cool element of it is you still end up with armies that are mostly of people with like toting rifles, like mostly historical armies that have a bunch of exotic stuff added on top. And I think that is the perfect balance. There are games out there that I think go a little bit too hard in the weirdness. Like, so for example, you got Wild West Exodus. I just haven't really found a faction in Wild West Exodus that speaks to me. And I really need that in a game. I really need there to be some sort of faction that like I really can get my grip on and really fall in love with, and I just never found that in Wild West Exodus, because most of them are like the starter box for Wild West Exodus I was looking at, and it's like robot guys versus power armored guys. I'm like, Wild West Exodus, isn't this meant to be a cowboy game? It's like, yeah, but it's kind of weird. It's like guys in robot mech suits and fighting dudes in like big armored suits. And I'm like, it's not what I wanted. I wanted like a cowboy. Like where's my dude with a 6-shooter? Now I think those models exist, but it kind of put me off a little bit. I think it's too much. Whereas what I would be looking for from a kind of alt history setting for a Wild West game would be mostly guys with guns and like classic cowboys. Still want to live the fancy of the cowboys, but give me like a weird Gatling gun, or give me like a weird spider bot or something that somebody has, right? Like add that on top. I think that those exotic kind of ahistorical stuff should be the sprinkles on top. Should be the kind of the spice that gets added, not the whole cake. I think that's a big mistake. Akemi Hikaru says there was a minis game that had the idea that you're talking about, historical but mythological. It was called Arcane Legions. I'm guessing from your past tense perspective then that it doesn't no longer exists. Total War Warhammer is so good, says Gusto. I agree. I really like it. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Emery Cunningham says, Bolt Action and Flames of War and those Zvezda games that use the Richard board commands and color Memoir 44 rules are a big part of historical wargaming. Yeah, they are. I've heard of those. Kingdom Vargas says, Flames of War is very competitive oriented and has moved towards trying to control the game for more profit. I'm very sorry to hear that. Burma Bean says, very slightly Warhammer curious. I just like this channel. I play Magic the Gathering Commander, by the way, and have a Necron deck. That's awesome. I think if I were to get into... So I've played a little bit of Magic the Gathering here and there. And I think if I were to get into the game, I'd probably be like just playing like some casual Commander stuff. I almost bought the Warhammer decks. Mostly because I wanted to play an Imperial deck, although I was saddened to hear that it was a Space Marine deck as well. I was very saddened to hear that. But I was interested, but then the prices was just like too much for me. It was like £60 or so, like, or £30 for a single deck. It just felt like, ooh, it felt like a bit much for me. But I'm very glad to hear that you enjoy the channel. Thank you very much. Colin Max says, Discourse needs to get her halflings done to play ambush rolls for kings. I'm afraid to say that is a victim of the pile. That is one of the many projects that needs to be completed. Now, that said, I've been really good recently. So I came to, so that video, I recently did a video on like my pile of shame, and it was kind of a little bit of a come to Jesus moment. And I have realized what my problem is that I buy too many bundles trying to get value, right? I wait for like really good deals and then I try to purchase them. And I think this has been a trap for me because what happens is I end up getting too much. I end up buying like too many models that I don't want or need. So what I did with my bolt action force, and it has worked absolutely swimmingly, I did not buy a starter box. But Warlord Games sell a lot of really good starter boxes. They are tons of value. You get loads of models inside them for very, very cheap. You get the rulebook and things. I did not buy these. I did not buy any of these starter armies. Instead, what I did was I bought exactly what I needed. I was like, these are the models that I think I will have fun playing with. I'm going to buy these ones. These are the ones that look cool to me. I bought a box of infantry. I bought a tank. I bought a flak track. I bought a mortar squad. And a commander. And I was done. I did not buy a big, massive bundle. I bought each of those things individually over a period of time. I did one. I completed it. I went on to the other. My God, it worked. I now have a full army, almost entirely painted. I have 5 more models to do. I'm in the middle of painting them. And to be honest, I struggle with the time to paint them as well, because I spend so much time trying to run this channel and my second channel, Dungeons and Discourse. But I've been staying up past my bedtime, been very bad. I have been going to bed every night at like 4 a.m. and staying up. So in the midnight hours, I have been painting my models. And it has worked for the first time in my life. I have done a decal. Look, I did a decal. Check it out. Look at those little decals. They're on this tank. Wow. I did decals on a tank for the first time ever. Because I was like, I'm gonna just get an army 100%. I have never finished a Warhammer army. Not really. I've got armies that I could play at 2,000 points, but I've never like finished, you know? I've never been like, I am done now. I have everything I need. It's over. I have my Gene Stealer cult army. I'm not done with my Gene Stealer cult army. I have Gene Stealers that I need to put together still. I'm not done with my Guards army. I've still got a Guard stuff I need to put together. I'll never be done with them. Have you ever heard of Dracula's Americas, says Greg Cherry? I have heard of it, but I have not had the time to play it. I've never tried it. Emery Killian says, Wild West Wind Games has Secrets of the Third Reich, which is weirdly parallel to Conflict 47 with supernatural and super science piled on mechs and paper tanks. I have that game. I actually do have that game. I've got Secrets of the Third Reich. I do have that, actually. It looks interesting. I want to try it out. But I bought the book. I found it in a thrift store where I pick up a lot of my books, actually. I get thrifty with it. Have you tried Acton Cthulhu by Modiphius? Alt History, World War II, Lovecraftian horror war game, says Quantum Sheep. I have not played Acton Cthulhu, but again, I am very aware of the game. I would like to try it at some stage. There's just so many games out there, guys. So many games out there. Mr. Incompetent Gamer says, Bolt Action has already dipped its toe in alternative history with its Operation Sea Lions books. Yeah, I'd like to see more of those, honestly. Honestly, I'd like to see more of those. Noodle says, Discourse, have you looked at Ion Age by Alternative Army? Says, Women's Space Marines on the front cover. Ooh. Strangely spicy. I haven't, actually. I haven't heard of it. Ion Age. I have not heard of it. King Tiger. Kitty Walker says, ... Yeah, I know. I know it's overpriced. I know it's overpriced for the points, but I don't care. It's a big old tank. It's a big old tank. Love tonks, decals and all. This tank is too big. Have I seen the Zeus Panzer mech? I have seen the Zeus Panzer mech. It is, I will not be buying that anytime soon, but I would like to at some stage. It does look pretty cool. Crypto Kev, thank you very much for the $10 donation. Says, I got a bounce. I'm going to shamelessly shill. She won't. $4 to join her Patreon and Discord. Exclusive content and fascinating people to talk to. Ask about the Disconomicon. Cough. Thank you very much for the shout out there, Crypto Kev, and the donation. I really appreciate that. Yes, the Patreon is awesome. There are all sorts of secret channels where there are all sorts of secret conversations occurring. Thank you very much. May we ask the Space Marine vid question? Ask Scython. You may, Scython, you may. I may have a date set for it, and it might be this week. You might notice, I wonder if I can, you might notice that I'm in a different position right now. Yeah. You might, I'm trying to adjust this. Yeah. I can't, sorry. Now I'm slightly askew. The dream. I have a new desk and I have a new setup that my second camera can now point down at this table, which means the Space Marine video is coming. The Space Marine video is coming. I'm hopefully going to have it out in March. Like very soon. Like very, very soon. Like next week, potentially soon. I will not hold my, I mean, I don't see why I wouldn't be able to unless something goes really wrong. But yeah. I'm expecting it out very shortly. I have set a date for a 24 hours marathon. I will be staying up. Part of the reason why I have been staying up past my bedtime to get painting done and staying up till 4 a.m. is to get myself ready to get into this 24-hour stream. Or not stream. Sorry, I'm not streaming it. God, no. There's no way I'm streaming it. But I will be recording it, though. And chopping it up into little bits to turn it into a video. And yeah, it should be coming out soon. We'll probably be doing the building process first because I have to put them all together. It's 2,000 points worth of Space Marines. I have to put them all together. And I have to have a re-look at the list because I think the points values have changed since I last made my video on it. Ooh. Oh. Cleo, thank you very much for the $5 donation. Says, this is me buying an indulgence to make up for saying something embarrassing. Also for the good live chat session. Cleo, nothing embarrassing at all. Thank you very much for the donation. I really appreciate that. Although, of course, I do want to let people know I do offer indulgences. This is something I do offer on the chat. I do offer indulgences. If anybody wants to do a mea culpa, by all means, I will accept money for that. Almost as bad as the Catholic Church, Circa, what, 1400s, 1500s? Thank you very much for the donation, though. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Jacobachi says, watch 40k 9th edition battle reports. It looks very boring. It does nothing for me. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Tabletop CP recently. He does a lot of bolt action battle reports. They had so much fun. Very dynamic games. Tons of fun. If you're somebody who's like, will a game like, will this historical war game be for me? I would actually recommend checking out his channel and checking out some of his bolt action battle reports. It's a very easy to understand game and it is a ton of fun. Very tense, very exciting. It is a lot of fun. Shaheen Shakar says, 4 a.m. Bro, take care of yourself. I am very tired all of the time. Shaheen, you might be able to see the bags under my eyes. I'm getting a little bit Ash Barker here on it, but yeah. I've been painting. I need to paint the models. I need to get them done. I need to get them out of the way. I need to tackle this pile. Of shame. Noodle says, what's your thoughts on 50 millimeters? Ever try them? I've never tried them. I've never tried 50 millimeters. The small models has always like alienated me, right? I've always been like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this. But as I get older, the models, I get increasingly appealed to the smaller models. I do. Not a cult, says Afrin. That's very important to emphasize. Not a cult, for sure. Scython says maybe stream 2 hours of assembly, coffee stream, some chill miniature building, getting some more donations in before you start into it. Yeah, so my plan is to do that. My plan is to begin streaming some more hobby stuff and do some like unboxings and stuff, you know, like as part of streams. I have like a bunch of the I've got a lot, so this might come as a surprise to people. I've got a lot of opinions on a lot of games. So I want to take the opportunity to kind of like take some of the stuff that I've got like in my pile of shame and start going through those and talking about them on the channel. So there might be some more content like that. There might be some live streams like that. There might be a little bit of painting content too. I might actually be painting some stuff maybe in streams. So this is something you might want to hang out for. So yeah, I'm going to be doing that increasingly so. Yeah, so that is the hope, that is the dream. I was originally planning on doing it on Twitch, but I think I might actually just do it on the YouTube, you know, and then unlist the videos after they're done. My fear with these kind of hobby videos is that like people aren't really that interested in them, to be perfectly frank, I don't think. So what I might do is I might just live stream them and then just unlist them afterwards so that they don't come up in people's feeds and don't get clicked, and then it reduces the CTR for all of my videos. And oh my god, I hate YouTube. It is a nightmare. Yeah. Zipzap says Panzer IV and Sherman are kind of cheaty. They are the middle of the road that all tanks aspire to be. Not too cheap, can deal with 90% of problems. If they can't do the thing is needed, is too costly. I bought a King Tiger. I bought the most expensive points-wise tank in the game, I think, at 555 points for a single model. But boy, does it not do a lot of work whenever it gets blown up. I like it though, it's pretty cool. Okay guys, so here is the background on my German army. They are a German army that are trying to open a portal to hell to invade hell. So I had to buy King Tiger, right? I had to buy King Tiger. I had to buy Sigismund is my tiger tank name. I think it's that, or Sigurd. It's Sigurd, it's called. It's the name of my King Tiger. It is the Crusader going into hell to deal with King Paimon himself. Because I've got a sorcerer as the leader of my German force, obviously. God, it's like you don't even create all history. German armies, guys. You gotta go big with these things. Hence why my Germans are like covered in blood and stuff, and they're all screwed up. They're basically the villains from God, what's it called? Come on, guys, the video game. You kill Hitler in the first one. What is it called? Or Robot Hitler. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, that's the... I was gonna say Rammstein. I know that's not it. I know that's a band. Everybody Killian says, Bolt Action doesn't care about real force composition. If you buy 4 tank destroyers and 2 armored command cars and a mechanized platoon to scream well, it's historically accurate. But BA doesn't care. It just doesn't care. Yeah, right? It's more of a balance. It's more of like an infantry-based game, right? Unboxing, let's go. Hellcat, the one person who loves unboxings as much as me. I'm like, yes, give me unboxing content. Most people don't like them, right? I understand why most people don't like unboxing content, and that's because I find unboxing tends to not bring a lot of value to people, right? It's usually just like, here's the stuff I bought. This is why I really like modeling for advantages unboxing content, because they talk about the history of the models and stuff when they unbox them. Like they talk about and I'm talking like the actual real world historical context of these models. I think that's really cool. You get like a history lesson with wargaming. I think it's really fun. But you know, I plan to just give them my spicy opinion takes, which I have a lot of on a lot of games. Wolfenstein, yeah. I'm basically, see, I love playing the baddies in games, and hence playing the Germans in a World War II fantasy game, right? Hellboy, yeah. Hellcat says, what's your view on tabletop sim? Wizards going with new virtual tabletop mode, and games like Moonbreaker moving miniatures to a digital stake. Get a Puma if you haven't. I think that I actually have heard of Moonbreaker, and it's basically, so for those who don't know, this is really interesting. So Moonbreaker is a digital video game that allows you to paint. So it's kind of like a strategy game. It's essentially a war game in digital format. It lets you paint your models digitally. So you buy the spray, and it's not like you color them in like the old Dawn of War game. It's, you actually take your paint and it simulates the painting of the model, right? So you're digitally painting the model. Personally for me, I think that's going to be incredibly niche, and I do not see it taking off. Part of the reason for this is, as much as it is fun and cool to get like digital minis and painting them, I think it's a novelty. There is something to the tangibility of miniatures. There's something to the fact that I can hold this in my hands and I can hold it up to you, and whenever I'm playing with it, right, whenever I'm using it in a tabletop game, I'm physically moving it and I'm measuring from this vehicle, right? I really believe that actually elevates gaming. It elevates gaming. I heard a statement come from Turnip Max, the creator of Turnip 28. I chat with him a lot. He's in our Discord very often, actually. If you're interested in joining the Discord, there is a link in the description below. But I heard him say a statement once that really stuck with me, which was, what is the point in a miniatures game if you're not interacting with the miniatures on the table, right? And he was saying this in reference to true line of sight. And I thought it was a really insightful statement. And it has completely changed my perspective on things like true line of sight. I've actually grown to despise systems like the more abstract silhouette systems in games. Because it's true. Part of the joy of miniatures games is getting down to the table, you know? Getting down to the table and looking from the perspective of your miniature to see what they can see and getting immersed in this battlefield. And there's something to that tangibility, to that tactile feedback that you get when you hold a miniature in your hands and you're actually physically holding it and you can see it on the table. And when it gets destroyed, you remove the top of the turret and you put a bunch of plumes of smoke there, right? There's something really cool about that. And a digital game can simulate that, right? But it already exists. It's called Tabletop Simulator. And it's not as good. It's just not as good to play on Tabletop Simulator as it is to play physical tables. And I find that with so many of the board game hobby stuff, right? Find that with like TTRPGs like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't enjoy playing the games virtually as much as I like playing in physical. Board games, I do not like to play board games digitally as much as I like to play physical. I have the Gloomhaven game on Steam. Do you know what I don't play very often? The Gloomhaven game on Steam. Do you know what I would love to get to the table more often? Gloomhaven. There is something about the physicality of the game. If I were to play Twilight Imperium over like TeamSpeak or in a digital format, I would not have fun. I need to have an event. I need to have it be a day. You know, I need to have people around me on the table. It's so cool. It's awesome. And this is what I love about tabletop gaming. I love that physicality, and it adds so much. It's why war games on the table don't need to be as strategic or tactical an experience as an RTS game, right? I am not looking for the same level of balance from a war game on the table as I am looking for like StarCraft, for example, right? Because StarCraft has to succeed on the merits only as a strategy game. Tabletop games can get away with a little bit more. They can be a little bit looser. The reason for that is because it is so much fun intrinsically. It is intrinsic joy to just simply play with your toys. Do not quote me out of context on that one. Especially solo games. Yeah, right? There is something really joyful to this element of play. There really is. I'm a huge advocate of it. I really am. Really big advocate of it. Right? People call me negative. I am so positive about war games. I love it. Hellcat says it'd be a great way to get into 3D digital artists into wargaming. I mean, sure, yeah. I think actually though, we're gonna see a lot of them are getting into 3STL files. In any case, a lot of them are getting into 3STLs. I think. Tons of them are getting into it that way. Juggler John says, what an amazing personality you are. Pure nerd enthusiasm turned to level 10. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you to say. Reverse periscope needed, says Poor Kid. Grumpy says, well, true line of sight, the miniatures are nothing more than glorified tokens. No, I understand. There's some games, I think, where I get it. There's some abstract need. Like, for example, Bolt Action abstracts out terrain somewhat, like houses. You just simply garrison a structure, and that's kind of it. And I kind of understand for speed of play, but where you can, for example, in skirmish games where the gameplay is already pretty fast and there's not a lot of models on the board, I do think that true line of sight is really fun. I really do. Yep. 50% of the fun is gone when played on Tabletop Simulator. I do agree, Scython. I do totally agree with that. You know, I'm not saying it's bad, by the way. I play a lot of games on Tabletop Simulator. Do not get me wrong. I play a lot of games on Tabletop Simulator, especially because it's easier. There's a convenience to it. But it's not the same. It's just not the same. Yes, plumes of smoke gang, says Max Reebok. Oh, yeah, 100%. Cleo says, okay, I'm convinced Moonbreaker might be fun for a weekend getaway project, though. Don't get me wrong, Cleo. I'd probably buy it and play it. I probably would. But it would never become, like, my main game. I don't think it would ever replace, like, wargaming for me. Imagine if DW could sell you virtual armies you had to digitally paint. Oh God, says Noodles. This is one of the fun parts of Dawn of War, was getting to customize your guys. Now it feels you can't even customize your models. Fire Silent Mouse says some of us can't bend over that far anymore, discourse. That's fair. That is fair. I get you. I get you. I'm still pretty nimble. I'm still pretty spry. I'm still pretty spry. It's the only bit of exercising I get these days is playing war games. So I need to be I need to be kept nimble. When it's like just use a silhouette, I'm like, no, not how am I gonna get my exercise in? Diane5 says getting close to the table is great until you have a banner pull in the eye. That's very true. But I mean, like, this is the reason why it's so much fun to play with terrain and painted models, and you know, like this is part of the reason for it. It's the immersive nature of it. That's what's really fun about it. And I just find it harder to get immersed in a digital game. One of the games I play mostly digital is the Batman Minis game, mostly because the community is so small. To get a game in, you kind of have to play digitally. It's the only game where I've played a lot of digital games and more digital games than I have played physical games. And like, you know, it's fun, but it's nothing compared to the physical game. It's just nothing compared to the physical game. Takes longer too, strangely. Mr. Navidad says, I like RTS games, but I suck at it. I mean, I've been playing RTS games since the very beginning. I grew up playing my uncle's RTS games. I grew up playing Command and Conquer and like Battle for Middle Earth and Dune and Warcraft. I grew up in all these kind of RTS games, and that got me into strategy games in the first place. And I've always been bad at them. I am a skirmish gang. Skirmish gang represent. I am a skirmish player. I am co-op versus AI. I am give me bots or give me death. I don't really play online. I'm very bad at games. I click icons. I do not hotkey. I refuse to get better. I am a bad player. But hey, I have a lot of fun. I'm kind of bad at war games too. I'm not like bad. I'm not like terrible war games, but I'm not like great. I'm not like a great gamer. I play with people who are much better strategists and gamers than I am when it comes to war games. It's why I'm a big advocate for solo games. My ego can only take so much, you guys. Thank you very much for the donation there, Sylvia Bear says. Have to go be an adult. Thank you for the stream, Discord. Thank you very much, Sylvia Bear. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. When are we gonna get Leo 40k? Says Stu Rat. We will get it at some stage. 100%. We will get that. Lolowit says, did I remember you saying you had issues with Necromunda? Was curious to know your thoughts on it. Necromunda is a very infuriating game to me because Necromunda is genuinely really cool. I love the setting of Necromunda. It's my favorite part of the 40k setting. I love the hive. I love the factions. I love the variety of the factions. I love the way they're all a little bit different. They've all got their own vibes. I actually like, so if we can talk about the positives of Necromunda for a little hot second, I think that the setting is really awesome. I think that a lot of the variety of sculpts are really cool. I love the fact that the different factions were updated in the new version of Necromunda to be very different from one another. I actually prefer that the factions are a little bit asymmetrical, you know? That like each faction kind of has a vibe, you know? The Van Saar are like, they really leaned into it with them. The Van Saar are like really good at shooting, and the Goliath are really good at punching, and the Asher are really good at poisons. I think that's really fun. I think that works for a skirmish war game. I prefer that element to the older version Necromunda, where everybody was kind of the same, and then they had these little spices added on top. I think that's really neat. I think some of the model design, some of the sculpt design from Necromunda has been absolutely fantastic. Positively amazing. I think when Necromunda first came out, it had a lot of balance issues, but I think that they slowly worked a lot of these out. It still was an imbalanced mess, but they worked out a lot of these issues and they made it a little bit easier to get into. However, as time went on, they kept releasing more books. They kept adding more bloat onto a game that didn't really need these types of updates. Where they should have been adding in new factions, they instead decided to like add new units to the existing factions. It was really, really weird. I can only suspect because they figured they could sell specialist boxes for more money than they would have been able to sell. Because for a long time, buying a gang box for Necromunda was actually a pretty affordable experience. Big problem as well is that their big starter boxes tended to be way too big. Way too big. Now, all of that said, my big issue with Necromunda is too many books, too confusing to play. very imbalanced now. Very, very imbalanced. I don't think the rule set is that good. And it's not that I don't think it sets out to achieve its own goals. I think a game has to be judged on whether or not it has a goal. When it seeks to emulate some sort of behavior, it wants a certain type of game. And what Necromunda wants to be is a fast and furious, brutal war game set in a hive where you're climbing up towers and you're falling off them, you're getting shot off them, people are getting slammed into corners. It's this brutal war game where violence is on the menu. 9 times out of 10, what I found my experience of Necromunda was standing as far back as possible and firing at people with a couple of las guns, trying to buy as efficient gangers as possible, and experiencing incredibly one-sided games that ended up not being fun for anyone. And that was what really sucked about the game. And I wanted them to address that. I was hopeful that they would. And then what they did was they created Ash Wastes, which was like not what I wanted at all from Necromunda. I wanted the game to be good. I wanted them to improve on the game, but instead they just kept on releasing more books, more models. They released Ash Waste, which was vehicle gameplay, which really felt very ancillary to the core experience of Necromunda. Like they hadn't settled the game and they were expanding it. Like it just did not feel very good. I really wanted the campaign system to be fun. I really did, because it felt like it was such a core focus of that game, but it just wasn't. As I have arbitrated many campaigns for Necromunda, none of them have been particularly good. They always ended up being very lopsided in one direction. One person ran away with it very quickly, and it was impossible for anybody else to beat them to it. Yeah, I've got a lot of... Necromunda is a bit of a heartbreaker for me, because I love Necromunda, and I really wanted it to be very good. Thank you very much for the donation there, Scython. Thank you. While I put my battery in my headset. Another super chat I know, but Discord, did you see the new Command & Conquer clone preview, Tempest Rising? My brother-in-law showed it to me. I'm super hyped! So I did see it. I saw it like a year ago, and I know it's coming out at some stage, so I am excited for it, but my hype is muted because I have been disappointed just too many times. I can't let myself fall in love again before I'm ready, so I'm gonna wait. This has been a very good year for RTS games, though. Well, but Age of Empires 4 came out. It was surprisingly good, still incredible, really good game. Company Heroes 3 came out recently. It was very good. You may catch the soundtrack of Company Heroes 3 on a future video, because I might have had the game open whilst recording and forgot. And so in the background, you can kind of make out the soundtrack of Company Heroes 3 because it continues to play. And I couldn't record the video game because the video was very much a spontaneous video that could never be recaptured. So, professional. But my failures have been the boons to others, because Company Heroes 3 has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. Noodles asks, are you aware there is a fan-made Bionicle wargame and TTRPG? I am not aware of that, Noodles. I am very surprised. Bionicles kind of passed me by. I think I was a little bit... Because Bionicle got really, really big for a while there. I remember when I was a kid. But I think I was a little bit just slightly too old for the target demographic. So I just missed out on getting really into Bionicle. Silero says the amount of books required for Necromunda is absolutely insane. Necromunda should be a very easy sell. It should be, buy this rulebook. It has the stats you need. You know, it could even be free online. Buy a box of gangers. You're done. You've got what you need. Buy a box of gangers, you're done. Oh, you want to really expand your gang? Well, you could buy a second box of gangers. There we go. But the problem with that, though, is that it's not designed for consumers to just simply be able to buy product and be gone. Because Necromunda was actually really affordable for a while. The actual box sets of gangers were like pretty cheap for Games Workshop standards. You bought a box and you were done. But now they've added so much extra guff to have to purchase. It sucks. It really does suck. I really wanted it to be good. I really did want it to be good. Hal 9000 ND says, anyone remember Chronopia? We had a grand time as lads. I don't know Chronopia. Kenny Walker says, lately we have played a fair bit of Pony Wars, old game Wild West, but very much Hollywood style cooperative, with the opponents being controlled by cards and dice. Okay, that's very cool. I haven't heard of that either. Solero says, the campaign system for the original Necromunda was way better. I've read some battle reports, like some actual plays of the old campaign system. It does sound like a lot of fun. Have you tried Shadow Dark? New old fun RPG everyone is talking about. No, I have not tried Shadow Dark. Nudo says the Night Sacramento still has dedicated players, and Mordheim. It does indeed. Well, Mordheim is being basically kept alive by these kind of dedicated players. George Atkins says when the original Command & Conquer came out, they had a hidden giant ant campaign and a dinosaur one as well. I remember the giant ants. Those dangerous things. Quadrishi says, what is this buy a box and you're done that you speak up? I know, it's kind of insane, right? But that's honestly what I expect from most games. Like, for example, a game like Carnivale, you buy the starter set and you're actually done. If you want to collect the guild, like, you basically have your guild force there from the starter set. But, you know, if you like somebody else, say you like the Catholic Church, for example, like I do, in the game, and you purchase the box set for the Vatican. I'm basically like I'm almost done at that stage. When I've bought a single box. The box is a bit expensive for what you get. You get 5 models for £25, which to me is pretty expensive. But you do get that, and you're basically done with the game. Like, that's it. You know, like, there's nothing more really to buy. You have those models. And that's kind of what I expect from a skirmish game. That's the level of commitment. But unfortunately, that doesn't really grok with the kind of Games Workshop business model at all. You know, it just doesn't really grok with the Games Workshop business model. Which is a real bummer, to be frank. You know, it's just a real bummer. Because that game could be really popular. I think Necromunda has the potential to be very, very popular. But because it's kind of a specialist game, I mean, it's the same with all their specialist games. Games Workshop just don't have any faith in them. And that's why they sell them in those big bundle boxes. But they have even less faith in Necromunda because they don't sell them in the big bundle boxes. They actually just keep them off in their own little corner and just sell resin minis from Forge World, which is basically a nightmare scenario to be in if you're a gamer. Like, I mean, to be honest, speak to Blood Bowl players, and most of them are buying third-party stuff. Most of them aren't even buying directly from Games Workshop. And Games Workshop are trying to make that harder and harder by shutting down STL sellers. Another point that we never talked about, actually, in our topic on whether or not Games Workshop are good for wargaming. Games Workshop have tried to monopolize the selling of certain things in the hobby, you know? I mean, there's a reason why so many people create kind of... trying to put this in a certain way, Space Marine lookalikes, right? Trying to put it like they build these models, they're Space Marine lookalikes, because that's kind of what most people want in the hobby. Or rather, I should say, it's what most Warhammer players want. And Games Workshop are always trying to shut down these creators. Chronopia is the sister game of the Mutant Chronicles, says Larbeard. I've heard of Mutant Chronicles. I have heard that. Mike Tyke says, imagine if Games Workshop sold Monopoly. You'd get a starter box with a board and one deck of cards and half the playing pieces. Then they sold separately booster packs that would have other cards and properties. Honestly, guys, if you want to get a little bit of a reality check, I suggest you talk to a board gamers and you ask them about Games Workshop and you ask them about the business model of Warhammer, and most of them will be like, that's insane. Seriously, like, that is what the board game marketplace is what a relatively healthy marketplace looks like. There's tons of different games. There's tons of different options. You have loads of choices. Now, there are problems with the board game market. You get things like Kickstarter that I think has eked and has become a bit of a problem in board gaming. But Kickstarter, crowdfunding, there's upsides to that as well. Crowdfunding in general has upsides. The problem is that bigger companies take advantage of it. But you know, my point is there is a lot of choice in board gaming, and I would love to see wargaming emulate that element. Like that, all of that said, I was talking to Uncle Adam from Tabletop Minions about this, and his perspective is that there's a lot of different games out there these days. There's a lot of different war games out there. There's a lot of choice, right? And obviously Uncle Adam has created multiple games at this stage. Multiple games. I was gonna say Hell Let Loose, that's not it. But he's created multiple games, Space Station Zero being the most recent, which is a really fun game. I want to actually try and get a game in of that soon. I've got some sci-fi models that I need to crack out and get ready. But I want to play that some stage soon. Maybe review it for the patrons. But I was speaking to him about this, and his perspective is basically that the hobby itself has never been bigger, and I agree with him. The hobby has never been bigger, and there's never been more choice at all. I mean, we got so many indie games now. There's been a little bit of a contraction lately. I have seen creators have to close up shop, have to just stop this because they just haven't been able to make enough money. And one of the things I will say is that if you are a content creator, if you're a creator of games, if you're a miniature creator, you know, you're making a rule set, it is very hard to break into wargaming. It's very hard to break into this industry. very, very hard. Very, very hard. I mean, it obviously helps if you got a platform, right? And I don't want to sound mean here, but I mean, obviously Uncle Adam has a huge platform. He's got lots of fans. And so if he makes a game, he's going to find it easier. I don't think he would disagree with this. He's going to find it easier to sell that game than if he was just like, you know, some hobbyist, just some hobbyist who just wants to make a really cool game. And like that is why my advice would be, if you're somebody who wants to break into the industry, would be get a platform of some kind. Start a YouTube channel. Create a blog. You know, tweet things. Tweeting about female space marines seems to be really popular these days. Just do that, right? Build a platform on something, and you can. At that stage, I think you'll have a better time selling your game than if you just tried to sell a really cool rule set. Like that, it'll be much harder for you to sell that. And I mean, it's true. I think it's just on like prima facie true. And we see a lot of content creators coming out with war games, and those war games look cool. Those war games look awesome, and I'm excited for a lot of them. But they, you know, it is the case that once you have a bit of a platform, it's much easier to sell a war game. And like a lot of smaller creators are finding it hard or struggling. They're coming in with the games, and they really want to sell them. Now, there are games out there that are being released. There are more than ever. I think it's like uncontestable. You cannot. I think there's more games now than there ever has been, and there's more people talking about other games for sure. But you see, here is where myself and Uncle Adam, I think, disagree. I think we disagree on this. Uncle Adam's perspective was that basically that he thinks that it is a result of Warhammer, that more people are getting into skirmish games, and I hope I'm not misrepresenting what he said, or his intention. But basically that more people are getting into skirmish games than ever before because Warhammer for the longest time did not offer that type of gameplay experience. It offered your kind of big rule set, your big army games, and it was kind of convoluted and complicated. A lot of people out there just want a very quick, very easy game, and skirmish games are very good at delivering that. They want the people to play on their coffee table. People increasingly do not have space for a big 6x4 table. We're living in smaller and smaller places these days. We just don't have the type of money to throw around on that. Skirmish games are the perfect option, and as a result, you were getting Warhammer players getting into skirmish games. My argument would be, actually, I think that the rise of skirmish games is less to do with Warhammer and is more concurrent with the boom in board games that we saw. As more people got into board games, that people generally got more interested in war games as well, because there is this kind of funnel that goes from board game, board game to war game miniatures, and the joy of miniatures got increased, right, with these big CMON kind of Kickstarters. And I suspect that actually, if we were really to locate why skirmish games were in a boom and why war games were in a boom there for a while, it's more to do with the wider market of like board games. And to be perfectly frank, if we want to go a step higher, I would say almost general nerdism, right? Like general, like it's hip to be square, as was famously claimed in the 80s. But now indeed it is hip to be square. We got Marvel, we got Star Wars, you got your Mandalorians, you know, you got all this good stuff. Lord of the Rings is coming back, nightmare scenario right there. Right, but it's basically there's a lot more people who are like comfortable doing things that would have traditionally been seen as nerdy, and that has basically a rising tide raises all boats, and we're seeing people get into wargaming who didn't get into it or maybe were curious about it in the past. Uncontestable, says Efren. I think I said incontestable. Yeah, I'll just have to live with that one. Let's see. Plastic Praetor says, "Are Games Workshop good for wargaming?" No. A very simple answer there. I think it's very complicated, honestly. I think it's very complicated. Mike Track says, or if GW sold toasters, the bread slots and power cord would be in a separate booster pack. Probably likely. I mean, one question I sometimes have is this: it's even a relevant question to have. Like, should we even talk about this? Is it just the case that, like, well, it is what it is, and that is all. We just have to accept it and just kind of move on, right? It's like a weird question to ask. Is it good or bad? This is kind of irrelevant. We just have to kind of think about how we go forward. You know, I get that perspective a lot. I understand. I think about it a lot. But I think personally that we need to, if there are problems, we need to locate and identify those problems in order to resolve them, right? Like, we cannot talk about Warhammer and Games Workshop's monopoly on wargaming. I think we have to understand if that is actually bad for the wider hobby, because then that informs whether or not we should do something about it or seek to do something about it, right? Right? Like this, like the idea of a monopoly does not have an inherent moral quality, but whether or not that monopoly is good or bad, really, I think is a question that you have to ask. You know what I mean, right? Like these get a little bit. Okay, let's get a little bit. Let's get a little bit wild now. We're going deep now. Infectious Gloom says Forge World was the reason I quit the new Necromunda. I don't understand why they gave the main faction characters to Forge World. Forge World is overpriced. It's so overpriced and it's so expensive. It's impossible to justify. I've never bought a resin model from Forge World. Yeah, thinking about it, I've never actually purchased anything from Forge World. Now that I think about it, it's all too expensive. I remember one of my memories of Warhammer when I was a kid was looking on the Warhammer or the Forge World website. I think it was like 2000 something. Looking on the Forge World website and lovingly looking at the Deathcore Krieg. I always wanted the Deathcore Krieg. I collected a guard army. I always wanted a Deathcore Krieg army, but it was such a price that it was literally impossible. Like literally impossible. I was working a job. Illegally, I was working a job illegally at too young an age when I wasn't actually legally allowed to work said job. I was working a job in order to afford Warhammer, to pay for Warhammer. I could not afford Forge World prices. I could not buy Forge World. I was a kid, I had no responsibilities. Gamer Dan Norquest in Canada still has his own Chaos STL now, says Stephen McGrath. Is that the is that the Spiky Boys Go Hard one? Rain in Heck, says Haley Anderson. Rain in, I love that. I love that. That's such a good like little name. Rain in Heck. Oh god, yeah. That's not gonna call from now on. It's not gonna be Rain in Hell anymore. It's gonna be Rain in Heck. There's something very funny about that. George Atkin says Workshop is bad for the game industry as other companies are copying their business model. I do agree with that. I think they are. Krennis says I play Lizardman and Blood Bowl. The big guy players are Forge World and expensive. Got a whole team printed with unique skulls for just a little bit more than one bad guy. I play a Snotling team and luckily Snotlings are mostly in there, but I do feel like I want a star player at some stage. And I was going to buy a Forge World one, but I just could not justify the cost. It's just I just can't afford it. I just can't afford it on a hobby purchase. Let's see. Noodle says, ever read up on adventure war games like 5 Parsec from Home? Indeed, I have, Noodles. I actually do. I have a review. I have a review of Rangers of Shadow Deep on my Patreon channel, but I feel like I've reviewed 5 Parsecs from Home. I think I actually talked about it in 5 Warhammer games when I was feeling particularly frisky. I made a video about the 5 Warhammer games you should play. Back when this discussion point was kind of around before. Rene Lopez says OPG should create a box set and board game format for box with flat card minis and cardboard terrain all in one box. Star set, try the game, then you can upgrade regular minis. One Piece Rules actually does this. One Piece Rules actually sell cardboard minis, which is which might be of interest to people. Kitty Walker says, I am old. Was playing war games before Warhammer came out. I think there's a lot of people out there who think that Warhammer invented war games. Apparently all those Prussians didn't count. Noodle says, I wish to have a Star line that includes women Chaos Marines. Wasn't as expensive as near GW prices. Ravage Star, that's the name of it. For me, it's just not to my personal aesthetic tastes. I think that the Warhammer models are a little bit too busy. So the Ravage Star models are a little bit too much for me. A little bit too much. Brian Hall says, I'm just tired of the constant FOMO and limited box sets. Yeah. Fatigue is definitely a huge thing. It basically meant that I will never play Kill Team. I bought the starter set, the Kill Team, when it first came out. This season model, the FOMO boxes every single 3 months, where I have to make the decision. Do I want to buy the new gang, the new warband, the new Kill Team that I think look cool, and pay for a secondary Kill Team I don't want, and pay for a bunch of terrain that I either already have or don't want, or is always the case, it's super overpriced? Do I want to have to buy this massive bundle just to get the models that I want? And people say you could wait 3 months. Just wait 3 months to buy the new models. That is insane. Who has ever waited 3 months to buy like a video game or miniatures? Like, who has ever actually done that, you know? For something you really want. For something you really, really want. And you know what? I could, but having to make the decision every 3 months, having to go through the stress of like, do I buy this or not? To feel pressured to buy it because you want the miniatures, you want to play this kill team. It's absolutely, it's wild. It's so anti-consumer. It's so hot. It's a hostile business model. It's all about putting pressure on hobbyists. It's all about putting pressure on consumers to buy. It's all about just how can we put pressure on people. That is a hostile business model. And so as a result, I'm going to be hostile right back. It is anti-consumer. Well, I'm anti that. I'm anti that type of business. If it wants to be anti-consumer, I'm going to be anti that. Absolutely ludicrous to expect me to put up with a business model that just wants to take. I hate it. It didn't need to be this way. There was an alternative business model, one that has been practiced for many years. It is called release a product and sell it. It's a very simple business model. You want to sell a kill team to me? I will buy said kill team. Just sell me the kill team. Sell me the kill team. Show me the money. Like it's wild that we have become this group of hobbyists that are so inured to the FOMO and to this predatory business style that we're not ready to kind of justify these ridiculous box sets. I'll say ridiculous box sets. Just wait 3 months discourse. Just wait 3 months discourse. Just wait 3 months 3 months. Maybe this time it won't come out. We've seen box sets where they haven't come out in 3 months. It's been like 6 months. We've seen box sets not get released within box sets not get split up and sold separately. Why should we be doing work to like justify this predatory technique? You know? Why should we be justifying this? There are alternative ways to sell these models. There really are. And everybody else does them. I don't see why Games Workshop should be exceptional in this. Why Games Workshop should get away with this. It's not acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable. 3 years ago it wasn't acceptable. We weren't doing this 3 years ago. Kill Team used to get sold by just selling the boxes. In fact, the original 2018 Kill... Not the original. Yeah, the original Kill Team was quite different. I played it. It was in the old rule book. But 2018 Kill Team, one of the good points about it was that you could buy a box and get into the game. You could buy a single Warhammer box and get into the game. That's like the thing that people celebrated. It was easy. It was accessible. Now it's all about how do we sell massive bundles. That is the business model. How do we sell the maximum amount of plastic for the maximum amount of money to the maximum amount of people who will pay for it? And this is it. They're refining their business model. They're refining their business model. They just don't care. They don't care that I'm not buying them anymore because they're making more money by selling them to people who will pay for them. And I think anytime we justify them, we're covering for a predatory business. We're spreading cover and flack for a predatory business model. And it's actively made the games worse. It's actively made the games worse because now they all have to be kept to a certain schedule. You can't release these models organically. You can't just work on a new faction and just sell the new faction. You know, you can't like design it and then balance it and play test it. Now you have to, every 3 months there has to be another faction. Absolutely, this has affected the gameplay, the underlying gameplay. They're trying to justify these box sets in different ways as well, and the trade always ends up being the same. DT says, would it be possible to post private links to unlisted videos in your community tab? That way they're still accessible but don't track from the channel at large. I'm actually not sure, DT. I'm actually not sure. I think it might be the type of thing that I might maybe post in Discord or like on Patreon or something like that. Maybe, you know, maybe I'll post links there. But I don't, yeah, that's kind of the problem that I think it would hurt the channel overall to post these kind of unboxing and like, painting streams. I'd worry about it hurting the channel overall. So I'd probably unlist them afterwards. Whether or not I create a database or an archive or something like that, I'm not sure if that's possible, but maybe. Brian Hall said it's like they've made the concept of digital early access products physical. Early access to Kill Team for 3 months until they release the models. Exactly. Oh yeah, by the way, if you want to buy access, if you want to buy, this is the situation we're in. If you want to buy these 10 models, you have to spend like $150, $160. How is that justifiable? Or you can wait 3 months. What? Why don't you just sell the models, bro? Like, why don't you just sell the models separately? Oh, no, we just don't do that. Why not? Oh, because this way, you'll feel pressured to buy them. Like, all of them. The stuff you didn't want, you'll feel pressured to buy that too. Why is this acceptable again? Like, why are we accepting this? It's wild. It's wild. Noodle says Shadow War Armageddon is a weird Necromunda spinoff that became Kill Team 2018. Shadow War Necromunda. Oh, I remember Shadow War Armageddon. That's right. Cielo says Stormcast Lord Relictor still isn't available in his own. He was an OG Age of Sigmar release. Yeah, sometimes these models just don't get released. Sometimes it takes a year. Sometimes they'll release them. For the longest time, Games Workshop kept releasing these box sets that had like a single new like the Skaven would come out. The Skaven would get like a new codex, and Games Workshop would be like, get hyped for the new Skaven! Get hyped for the new Skaven! There's a new codex coming out for Skaven! You know the way you've been playing with these 30-year-old models? Do you know why you still collect Skaven for Age of Sigmar? Ho ho! Get prepared to be justified in your purchasing decisions, because today we are releasing a new codex. We are updating Skaven for Age of Sigmar. And what are you gonna get? A new assassin model. Single new assassin model. And he's new. He's new to the Skaven army. And you get to buy him if you buy the massive army set that comes with a bunch of models you probably already have. But hey, if you don't like that, you can wait a year, and then maybe he'll be released separately. Or maybe not. We don't know. We're not telling. Like, how is this acceptable? Skaven are a good army, Noodles. Skaven are a good army. It's wild. It's wild. It's absolutely insane. Luddite 70 asks, is Warhammer terrible for wargaming? Yes, entirely. It's evident when I speak to a Warhammer player who's unaware of the wider hobby. They have no concept of the Keith Robinson heart of the hobby. I think it's a pretty complicated, nuanced question, but it's definitely one I think that we do need to ask. You know? Mr. Comedy Giver says starter sets, rules, and 2 small forces for Team Yankee Flames to War and Bolt Action are less than the cost of a GW Combat Patrol. Yeah, I will. I hate this discourse around combat patrols about how much, which one's the most value. It's like, dude. Can I say neither? The new Blood Bowl e-game is peak GW, and the crystallization of everything wrong with GW today, says the Luddite 70. Yes, it is. So, yeah, I'm too depressed to talk about the new Blood Bowl. I will be streaming that again, by the way, soon on Twitch. I'm giving away I have 5 keys for Blood Bowl 3 to give away, which I will be doing soon in a Twitch stream. So keep an eye on my tweets or my Discord. Honestly, whenever I'm going to stream, I always post up in my Discord that I'm going to stream. So if you want to catch those streams, check that out. And a new box with old models, says Frankenstein. Yeah, it's so exciting. It's like you can buy this new bundle box. It has a bunch of models that you already have. Which was really egregious for the Skaven one too. It was like literally the exact same models that you got in the Start Collecting box set. It was so frustrating. Even the new blood, like even the new, I mean, they're doing it to 40k right now with these new, not combat, the boarding patrol boxes, right? It's like they just released on the open day. They were like, get excited for new Warhammer models, and I'm like, oh my god, are they releasing a new army, or are they updating some of the 30-year-old sculpts for some of the existing armies? No, they're bringing out some new heroes, some new hero models. You get your new commander, the Farsight, and an Orc Commando, Snickstrid is his name, and it looks a lot worse than the older one. Woo! You know, it's like I mean, am I meant to get hyped about this? I get that there's people who really love those character models, but I mean, I don't know. Like I don't find it as exciting. I just don't. I just don't find it as exciting. It's like a very small update. And not to mention, they're probably only going to be sold in these bundles of models that I already have if I collect that army. Pedro, don't you mind, says, but Farsight. The model looks fine. I'm a little bit over Games Workshop model design, I think, to some extent. Like I like the models. I think the models look okay. I think the best models that they've released recently have been the Arbites, but I haven't seen them in person. But I think that, like, from an aesthetic perspective, I think the Arbites have been the best models they released. I think they're worse at storytelling with minis these days. Personally, I think that they have gotten technically better, but they're worse at storytelling with the minis. In my personal opinion. Ooh, someone's not following my Twitch channel. Sorry, it's all hooked into the same place. So it's all hooked into the same spot. Got the Chaos Border Patrol yesterday, says George Attican. So the Border Patrols are really interesting. They actually are something that I've been asking for Warhammer for the longest time, which is a smaller box set that you can get into. Because they used to have the Start Collecting box sets, which I liked, but they started replacing them all with the Combat Patrol. I prefer to have a Combat Patrol and a Start Collecting box set, honestly. And I'm glad that they're doing the Boarding Patrol box sets. It's just... the Boarding Patrol game system was such a massive mess to make this very awesome, very accessible game system, and then they just made it like one of the most unintuitive, difficult to get into games ever. It just, yeah. Oh, now we got another follow on Twitch too. Mr. Company Gamer says the only advantage GW have is they only have to stock their own stuff. Any normal FLGS will have to be very selective about their shelf space. Yeah, I mean, that's why most game stores just have... Thank you very much for the follows. This is why most game stores only have like Warhammer stuff, right? There is one game store that I'm aware of that does not have any Warhammer, and they mostly in my local area, not in the world, but in my local area, and they sell wargaming stuff, but they sell historicals only. It's like historical models only. And they also sell like old toys and things like that, like really old school toys. They don't have any Warhammer things. They don't carry any Citadel branded stuff. That store does not have a cash register. They will not allow you to pay via card. You have to pay in cash, and they write everything sold down in a little book. So most local game stores will sell Warhammer, right? They'll sell a lot of Magic the Gathering. They'll sell these games that they kind of rely on. But here's the deal. I think Warhammer is increasingly becoming a problem for stores to sell. Firstly, the margins are getting really bad. I haven't talked about this before on the channel, I don't think, but I think it's true. Maybe I'll do a video at some stage on it. The margins are getting increasingly bad. Because Games Workshop is increasingly indulging in wheel selling, I think that the business model of Games Workshop is to monetize a small amount of players who are being aggressively sold to and will be buying into these kind of very expensive systems, constantly spending money. They're basically what you would call in the business is high lifetime value players. So that's what most Warhammer players are. They spend a lot of money on Warhammer models, but they aren't a big number, right? There are not a lot of people who are interested in them. It's a very niche kind of game because it's so expensive. It's part of the reason it's so expensive. That's fine for Games Workshop because Games Workshop obviously sell the models and they sell them all around the world. They are a global brand and they can sell all over the place, which means they can afford to cut people out of the hobby. They can afford to be exclusive about who they're selling to if those people buy lots of models. For local game stores, that's not the case because local game stores are not global. They do not have a wide retail network. They're not like a supermarket, right? They can't sell lots of stuff. They have to have a community in that local area who will buy explicitly from them, which means they can't be as selective. They might get lucky. There might be a wheel in their local area that can keep that single hobby store afloat, but they might not be. They might not have that. So they need these hobbies to be as accessible as possible because they need as many people as possible to be getting into these games so that they can sell those miniatures too. This wheel business model will kill local game stores. Because these local game stores are not guaranteed to have wheels in their local area who will purchase these products. Games Workshop are guaranteed to find wheels. They will. They find them. They exist. Noodles says, my local game stores is having a problem moving them and just ordering them because GW's only giving them a little bit of stock. Obviously, this has been a big problem as well. I think that problem, though, I don't think that Games Workshop are purposefully sliding third-party stores in terms of stock allocation. I think that is done by incompetence. I think that's their robots. Yeah, I think that's their actual robots. Games Workshop have robots, and they use those robots to distribute stuff. I think that's the problem with that. Now, Games Workshop, on the other hand, also don't care enough, I think, to make sure their local independent stores can get the stock in. Like, the game stores are being shorted very much. Like, literally, one of the stores I saw had ordered like 100 or 300 boxes, and they got 3. 3 boxes of Soul Shackle. Like, wild. Absolutely wild. Like, the degree of which they're kind of being screwed over is mad. I'm not sure if they're doing it on purpose, right? I don't think they're doing it on purpose, but they're definitely doing things like raising the margins, right? Like they're lowering the margins for local game stores because they're raising the prices they sell to retail. Hey there, John from On Tabletop. Says, I know the store you're on about. Never bought anything from them. The atmosphere was odd to me. Yes, John. I bought a bunch of my bolt action from there. The reason I like that store is that they stock. They're like the only store in Belfast, like in Belfast City Centre, with stock. This is a very niche conversation. They're the only store in Belfast City Centre that stock non kind of Citadel paints. Like they sell like the army painter and stuff like that. So I bought from there, but it is wild. My dream is to buy that store and to like put a cash register in. Oh god, yeah, it's to like buy that store and like let them accept card. They must lose so many sales. Yeah, I just can't imagine being a retail store today and like not allowing people to use card. Like how many people are like go up with a box of models to buy, and then say, this is a very niche conversation. They go up with a box of models to buy miniatures, and they say, hello, I'd like to buy these miniatures, and the person behind the till says, behind the desk says, we do not accept cards, we only accept cash. And they go, okay, well, I'll go to the local ATM and I will pick up some money. And they leave and they never come back. How many times does that happen a day, do you think? I think at least 7. If there is a good I think it happens a lot. For sure. George Atkins says, my mate stores traded with Workshop for years and dealing with them is a mixed bag. One time he got so angry with one of the rules he stopped selling the products for 2 years. You talk to guys, anyone out there, you talk to third-party retail stores, they do not generally like Games Workshop. I hear nothing but horror stories working at Games Workshop. I hear nothing but horror stories. I really do. And it's hard to like ignore those, you know. I mean, think about how Games Workshop treat their own employees. Think about how they treat their own employees, and imagine how they treat third-party stores who Games Workshop perceive as stealing money from them. Yeah. Max Reebok says local game stores going in on Funko Pops and collectibles really hard along with board games. I'm sorry to hear that. I personally, Funko Pops have never been my thing. I've just never really got it, right? I've never got like... See, I'm really into collecting. Like, I collect, obviously, miniatures, and I really like them. But I like collecting miniatures because they have a gameplay. I like to collect miniatures to play with. I like to collect miniatures to play them in games. I don't understand just the collecting for collecting's sake, if you get me. There needs to be, like, an excuse to collect for me. So Funko Pops have always sort of passed me by. I'm not, like, the biggest fan of Funko Pops. Noodle says there's a discounted copy of Silver Tower on my LGS. I'm actually quite tempted to buy it. Silver Tower, I don't think I ever played Silver Tower, you know. I don't think I ever played. I go to replay games, to be honest, says Pedro. Drunkosaur says that means one of two things: stock 3D printed knockoffs alongside the real deal, or invest in other war games and build a smaller local community center around that. Act as a local hobby. I agree. I think that the future of local game stores, I've spoken about this many times on the channel, is 3D printing. I think that is actually the future of local hobby stores. I think 3D printing on demand is the future of wargaming, and I think that decentralized distribution is the way we will be going, and I think it is the way that work companies should go. I really do think it is, because 3D printing is only going to get bigger, and every single day that I do not get myself invested in that in some way, I regret it. I'm like, damn, I really should get into this before it gets too overburdened, because it's already so saturated right now. Thank you very much for the donation there, Sidon. Says, on that matter, I went to my local Warhammer store, paints they were not allowed to sell because server connection was gone. Sent me away. I went to my local Warhammer store for paints, and they were not allowed to sell because the server connection was gone. They sent you away. So you went to buy paints. So let me get this straight. So you went into your local Games Workshop store. You picked up a bunch of Citadel paints from them, and you said, I would like to purchase these Citadel paints, please. I would like to buy, Lead Belcher. And they looked at you and said, unfortunately, our server does not connect right now to a local GWHQ, and we cannot, we can't sell you these paints as a result, because it will not feed back to them, and they'll think we're like stealing paints or something. Is that honestly what happens, Southon? That is wild. Noodle says they've been putting Funko Pops in landfills. They're the new Beanie Babies. Yeah, it's starting to feel like a bit of a bubble that has burst. Feeling like a little bit of a bubble. Talin Duras says, I really hope to have more people to play with locally one day. That is the big thing. I am so blessed. I am so lucky. I have a group of friends who play war games. I have people I play war games with. So I kind of can get away with any game, right? I can buy into like Lunar and be like, let's play some Lunar, and like I can convince people to buy it. I'm also good at convincing people to play games with me. I'm really good at it. I'm really good at getting people to try new games in person. I'm really good at being like needle. I'm very good at that. So I'm blessed in that sense, right? That I have this consistent group of war gamers that I can keep going back to and keep playing with. Problem, I imagine, for most other people, like, I mean, you know, let's think. What's a good? For example, what just came out recently? I keep thinking Lunar for some reason. Lunar is not new. For example, you get into Carnivale. You know, you want to get into Carnivale. Like, how are you going to convince people to get into Carnivale? Your local game store, if all they do is play Warhammer. You have to buy the models, you have to paint them. It's really hard to be a hobby advocate. It really is. It's really hard to be an hobby advocate. A hobby advocate. It's very difficult. And the thing about it too is, as we were talking about earlier, Warhammer has a lot of problems that other war games don't have, and people assume that Warhammer's problems is indicative of all war games, right? So for example, you go up to a Warhammer player and you say, hey, let's get into one-page rules. Want to get into one-page rules with me? And they say things like, I can't afford that. I can't get into more. I already pay so much money for Warhammer, and there's new rules coming out every single week. I'm constantly like feeling engaged. I'm like constantly on this treadmill. Like I have to play Warhammer. Like I can't get into like one piece. I can't get into another system. Are you crazy? And it's like, yeah, but actually the updates don't come that thick and fast, you know? Like if I'm into Carnivale. I have the rule book. I have not had to search up an errata since I bought that, like for like a year, right? Like I have not had to like, I feel like I could play Carnivale tomorrow. I feel like I could play Bolt Action tomorrow. I feel like I could play Lunar tomorrow. I haven't played Lunar in like months. I feel like I could just pick up my models and play Lunar tomorrow. It was a fun, fast game. It had a pretty coherent rule set. I feel like I could do that. Could I play Warhammer tomorrow? Could I buy swear word? No, I could not. I could not play Warhammer tomorrow. I would need to Google some stuff. I would need to figure out whether the points have changed, because I know they have. Like I know the points have changed. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but I know they have. So I'd have to Google that. I'd have to go on to the onto the bad boy website, onto the bad hobbyist website. I'd have to go on there and find out all the rules and see what's updated. I'd have to figure out what the stratagems are. Jeez, I don't have the stratagem cards. Oh, I'd have to like look at them again, start to memorize. It's a very big enterprise to get another game of Warhammer in. I think a lot of people assume that like Warhammer, like all other war games, are the same way. And some of them are. Like, don't get me wrong, some of them are like that. But not a lot are. Here's the deal though, do people want that from a war game? Do people want that as like a lifestyle hobby? Right? Like, dude, is that what people are looking for? They're like looking for that kind of investment. Simon says, yes, they said they are not allowed to sell. They weren't able to note what they sold on paper. So they couldn't like scan it? So do their cash registers so do the Games Workshop cash registers actually just connect to the server? Like, everything's connected, is it? Is it all online now? Is the Games Workshop store all online, just only online? It has to be online. Comrade Internet says, one problem that GW presents to 3D printing is that so much of what is available for 3D printing is just GW proxies. Great for folks who want weirdly specific Space Marine releases, not for everyone else. So I agree with you. I think that there is too many. I don't think there's too many, right? I obviously I want creators. I want artists. I want sculptors to be able to make the things that they want to make. But I acknowledge that there is a commercial reality to what they want to make, right? See, I am a believer in auteurs. I believe in individuals basically creating what they want to create. And I believe in art. I think that is where art drives from, right? I think it's from artistic vision. I don't think that you can really get great art from committee, right? I don't think you get really great games from committee either. I think that what you need, I mean, obviously collaboration is super important. Collaboration is super duper duper important. I think I think collaboration like that is super duper important for sure. And I think you can be informed by other people's perspectives. But ultimately, anything like art, anything like game, it needs a vision. You need to basically have someone saying, this has to be like this. There is a purpose, there is a goal, there is a method to this madness. So, as a result, I want to see people creating the things they want to create. But all that said, I acknowledge that there is a commercial reality to 3D printing, which is that most people are playing Warhammer. So therefore, most of the sculpts we see are, as you say, very specific Space Marine stuff. Very specific weird Space Marine stuff. Now, I like some of those, right? Like, I actually like a lot of those models. I think they look cool. I like a lot of the Imperial Guard proxies and stuff as well, right? Like, I like a lot of these models, but I understand where you're coming from. There is a lot of these, and I do think that there's a lot of people out there who are creating sculpts for models that they wouldn't if it weren't for the prevalence of Warhammer, right? Like, if they were just a 3D sculptor, they would be making other stuff. They'd be making other stuff. Now, every month I spotlight a store, a 3D printing store, for models that I find models that look really cool, and if they're a smaller independent 3D printing store, I go reach out to them and see whether or not they would be interested in getting a free plug on the channel, and in exchange for a discount code for my patrons. So every month I get discount codes for my patrons I get a 50% discount code off of 3D printed stores. This month actually I've got 2, and as in exchange for that, I basically give them like a free integration. I give them like a free ad plug, and I'll post about their stuff, and I'll talk about why I think it's really cool. And when I'm doing that, I'm not like going out of my way to try and find sculpts that do not look like Space Marines, right? Like, it's not like I'm going out of my way to be like, see, because the thing is, ultimately, this is the thing about me. I like Warhammer. I think ultimately it's like one of those things. I like Warhammer. I got started in wargaming with Warhammer. I like a lot of the designs. I like grimdark stuff. I think it looks cool. I like the space opera elements of Warhammer. I'm actually a fan of Warhammer stuff. I'm a fan of the aesthetics, and I like a lot of the interpretations of that kind of grimdark stuff from 3D print creators. But I do agree that there is definitely a preponderance of them out there. I can see how that could definitely rub. If you do not like grimdark stuff, there's a lot of 3D prints out there that are very grimdark, for sure. Yeah, I can get it. If you don't like grimdark stuff, it would be like, oh my goodness, this is not for me. William Marshall says, do you think GW will last if they don't offer 3D printing? Yes. I don't think they need to get into 3D printing. I think that they could have. I think they've missed the boat. They could have gotten into 3D printing. And I think it would have been good for Games Workshop, the company. I think that Games Workshop, the company, would have made a lot of money on 3D printing. They would have made a killing. And they would have dominated the 3D printing industry. And I think that would have been really bad for 3D printing. I don't think we would see the same sort of quality of models. I don't think we'd see the same scope and scale of models. I don't think we'd see the same type of creativity in 3D printing sculpts. I think that it would be actively bad for 3D printing if Games Workshop got into it, and therefore every day they don't get into 3D printing, I'm so happy. Really, I really am. This is one of those cases where like people are like, but think of a really cool model. I think it's be careful what you wish for. I really do. I don't think that it would be good for Games Workshop to get into it, because they would immediately seek to monopolize 3D printing, and they would be a lot more litigious. I mean, already they try to shut down creators all the time, erroneously too, I might add. They try to shut them down erroneously. They are a troll when it comes to this sort of stuff. They have a department of trolls whose entire goal is to try and find things that could arguably maybe be derived from some sort of Warhammer copyright, and try to shut down that creator by bullying them off the platform. And I think that is very wrong ethically, and I think it's something we should support. And I imagine it would be 10 times worth if Games Workshop was actually actively involved in 3D printing. I think it'd be really bad. Really bad. By the way, it is a myth. You do not need to actively enforce your copyrights. This is a myth. I don't know where this came from, but I suspect that it doesn't get argued against very often because it's very useful for companies to maintain this lie. But you do not need to actively enforce copyrights. You do need to keep a little bit of an eye on your trademarks, but you do not need to be as wild about it as companies are. You do not need to be as litigious about it as companies are. You can't lose your copyright. You just can't lose it. It doesn't matter if other people copy your copyright. You cannot lose copyright. You cannot lose your copyright. It is a myth that you need to actively enforce your copyright. You do not. No one can just take your copyright away. Of course they can. You lose the right to exclusively produce it, but that's the trademark. You lose the name. Noodle says, I found out you get free shipping if you order online orders at the GW store, oddly enough. But even with free shipping, surely it's not. Yeah, if you order it into the actual physical store, you get free shipping because it's part of their normal stock. But surely it's still cheaper to buy from a third party. This is a problem because in America, the third party discounts are much worse. Comrade Internet says, one problem that GW presents to 3D printing is that so much of what is available for 3D printing is just GW proxies. Great folks who want weird. Oh yeah, I've read this. I'm behind. I have to catch up. Noodle says, which GW games had a living rulebook that wouldn't make them money? I mean, they do. They do have a living rulebook. It just happens to be created by a fan of Warhammer in Russia. There is a living rulebook out there if you look for it, and it is free. Wahapedia, for those who don't know what I'm referencing. It's called Wahapedia. Look it up. Wahapedia is all the rules of Warhammer for free online, and I totally recommend you use them. It's 100% recommended. Bummerman says, UK discourse. I'm very tired. I'm very, very tired. Very, very tired. It's been a lot of long nights. Nordic Maelstrom says, GW lost me when they killed Warhammer Fantasy in favor of Warhammer Fistbrains. Well, okay, it was more so doing away with Tomb Kings and Bretonnia. Yeah, I miss Tomb Kings and Bretonnia. Bretonnia were like one of my favorite factions. They're so awesome. Simon TMN says, myth came from confusion with trademark law, surely. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is exactly where it came from, because you do need to enforce your trademarks. But the trademarks are such a specific thing; they're not copyright. You know, they're two different like things basically, and they get confused a lot. Comrade Internet says, despite my criticism of GW proxies being so prevalent 28mm, I do love that 3D printers revived a bunch of games GW basically abandoned. Epic, War Master, BFG. Yeah, I mean, 3D printing, I think, has been absolutely awesome. It is so cool. For a while, I was pretty like, yeah, it's not gonna take off anything. It's a little bit of a gimmick. But then, then it really started to take off. And then it was, woo! Yes! Give me more. Inject that resin into my veins. Do not do that. That is very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Don't do that. Simon says, I teach IP law, by the way. Oh, cool. Kenny Walker says, the plastic moldings must cost GW peanuts at a guess close to 5p a sprue once they pay for the mold, but 3D printed models will need to be relatively expensive for the same profit margin. Actually, Kitty, if you think about it, 3D printed models would be free, almost free. Because all you need to do is just sell the STL. 3D models are like pretty cheap to make. The main expense would come from the sculptor. And so like if I, for example, were to reach out to a sculptor, it would be pretty expensive for me to retain a sculptor. Because firstly, I'd want to pay them a fair wage. And secondly, or a fair commission price. And secondly, they do command a high commission rates because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, and there's a lot of training and background that has gone into it, and they deserve to be paid a pretty reasonable sum of money. Games Workshop, though, don't have that problem because Games Workshop have a bunch of sculptors on retainer, and they say, here, you, Dave, get to work. Get to work, you GW design studio. Get to work. And he would have to sculpt a model for pretty bad pay and sculpt the model and get it done, and then they would just sell it, and it would basically be free. It would basically be free because they've already factored in the cost of their employees into all their business, right? So like the 3D, it's almost pure profit. But see, the thing about Games Workshop is here is a hot little bit of detail. Their plastic miniatures are basically pure profit because, as you say, the plastic models are so cheap to produce They are so cheap to produce. They're almost peanuts. Like, it is pence. It is pence to produce a single sprue. The costs of plastic of cheap plastic sprues, the cost comes from the sculptor's wages, which, as we have discussed, is basically an irrelevancy to Games Workshop. They have a bunch of sculptors. They already pay a wage to, not a very good wage. It's peanuts. Secondly, the second thing is the master molds. That's the price, right? Of the master molds is the pricey part. For Games Workshop, that master mold cost gets paid off, I'm almost 100% certain, in the first run, in the first print run of the minis. When they release a new Space Marine, that master mold gets paid off in the first print run. And then from that point onwards, it is almost pure profit. Basically pure profit. They make so much money on these models. They really do. They make so much money individually. If you look at their numbers, the margins, they make so much money on these models. It is almost impossible to fathom. It really is. These models are not premium. They are printed in an extremely cheap material, the price of which has risen. It is an extremely cheap material. Metal minis are so much more expensive. Resin minis are so much more expensive to produce. So much more expensive. But at the scale that Games Workshop are producing, these cheap plastic minis, they are absolutely laughing all the way to the bank. It really is. Kino Walker says, yes, they want the same profit margin. At the moment, they're probably just finding much of the £30 of models based on pennies worth of plastic. Yeah, they are. I mean, like, whenever they sell, like, a box of Skaven clan rats, like, they're selling those for, like, how much? Like, because they're making those models for, like, 5p. So, like, they're selling those models for, like, £20, £30, and they're, like, it costs them, like, 5p to build. Like, it's an insane business. Like, they have stumbled into a very, very lucrative business here. They really have. John Table says, they aren't being sexist, they just don't want their audience being connected to any personality, says John. I don't know what that's in reference to. I presume there's like some sort of conversation happening. Forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce this name. Joao Lopez says, I stopped playing Warhammer Fantasy Battles in 8th and 40k in 6th, never looked back. And yeah, so I stopped playing Warhammer Fantasy, I think it might have been 8th for me as well. And then 40k, I still play to this day. I do still play Warhammer 40k to this day. I read once their markup in plastic costs like 50,000%. It's an insane amount. I don't have the numbers to hand, but their margin is really good. The thing about their margin is we don't get to see the actual margins on the individual kits. What we get to see the margin on are the kind of overall margin. And that will include things that they don't have good a margin on. So there's things in that list that are bringing the points down. But like overall their margin is like really insane. Like, you're talking, like, margins of, like, 12% are usually, like, really, really good. And they've got, like, margins, like, 30, 40%. It's, like, it's really wild. The markup is really big. Pleasure Page says, and the problem with that is that it raises the barrier entry to everybody. So Warlord do models that I have problems with, but one of the things I will say about their plastic kits is, for example, they throw them away at you. Like, they throw them at you. They absolutely throw cheap plastic at you. It's like 30 guys in a box. It costs you like £30. It's the same price that it would cost you to get 5 Space Marines. You get 30 guys. They like throw it at you. You buy tank kits for the Russian, for the Soviets, and you'll get like random sprues of infantry just thrown in there too, because it's the Soviets. They get loads of guys, so they just throw in random models. Just they're like, hey, enjoy, right? Like, they treat the plastic the way it should be treated. And there is something really refreshing and fun and nice about playing a game where the plastic kits are once again disposable. Where you're not afraid of screwing up the paint job. Where you're not afraid of building a model wrong. Where you're not afraid of making the wrong decision in your army building. Because, like, hey, I'll just buy another box. It's not that big a deal. With Games Workshop, it's the opposite. It's like, oh my god, I cannot screw this up. I cannot screw up this paint job. Otherwise, I will have to buy another Intercessor kit. And that costs as much as a video game. That is my monthly budget spent already. It's too much. It's too much money. It really is too much money. Positive Praetor says, I honestly think the master molds aren't as expensive as we're told these days. Either a 2 kilogram block of aluminium isn't dear, and they have the staff and cutting machines in-house now. Yeah, they've obviously... So a lot of the things that Games Workshop have been taking... So with all that money that they made, by the way, over the last couple of years, what they have done with it has firstly been to put it into shareholder dividends. They've been increasing their shareholder dividends by a lot. By a lot. The shareholders are making a lot of money these days off of Games Workshop stock because all that cash that they made, remember there was the big boom of Warhammer a couple of years back during the pandemic? All that money went into shareholder dividends. The second thing they've been putting that money into is making their processes more efficient. They've been improving their factories so that they can save money on the actual manufacturing of their products, which means they're saving more money on their margins now. They're actually making it cheaper to produce these models. And what are they doing? They're raising prices. People get annoyed at me when I talk about this stuff. They get annoyed at me when I talk about the prices. And I get that I repeat myself a lot on it. But it has to be constantly driven home just what a racket this is. Wolfie Down says, is there an alternative to Kill Team that you would recommend? It depends on... So I got in an argument with another content creator today. I'm not gonna name them, but it was pretty, frankly, it was a little bit asinine. And my point was, whenever you're talking about other games, I think you have to acknowledge Warhammer games when you're talking about other war games, because basically, if I want to talk to you about some of the skirmish games and you tell me that you play Kill Team, I will absolutely have to locate what it is about Kill Team that you either enjoy or don't like in order for me to recommend certain games to you. I think it is absolutely absurd to talk about war games devoid of context, to not talk about war games in the context of Warhammer. You have to. Most people talk about Warhammer. So whenever I talk about bolt action, for example, as I've been doing so today, I've been saying about how cheap the models are in contrast to Warhammer. I think it's really important to do that so that people understand that that these games are different. Whereas their position was that you can big up games without ever referencing Warhammer. I don't know why you would want to do that. I think if you are going to compare different game systems, and I think whenever I'm recommending games, I use comparisons, basically. I compare different games to one another. I like to, personally for me, I like to critically analyze these games and what makes them good and what makes them bad. Like I that's how I think about them. And so I, by necessity, have to compare them to one another in order to say, is Warhammer a fast-paced game? No, it is not. Right? It is not. And the reason why I know that is because I have played bolt action. I played one-page rules, right? I played these other games. So if somebody says to me, I don't like the way, so whenever I ask somebody, do they like fast-paced games? They'll say, I like Warhammer. Is that the element that you like, Is the thing you don't like about Warhammer how sluggish it is? Because if so, is it the turn structure? Because if so, there's games. Kill Team is kind of a weird one. So Kill Team, obviously the original Kill Team was just kind of designed to be, not the original Kill Team, 2018 Kill Team, god damn it, Discourse. Kill Team 2018 was originally designed to be like a very playable experience, very, very playable Warhammer experience, obviously. And it was very fast and furious. The modern version of Kill Team, I will say, this is the thing that excited me about Kill Team 2021 whenever it came out. The thing that excited me about it was a little bit different. It felt like the designers of Kill Team had been really, whoever they are, these anonymous figures from the Games Workshop Design Studio, they bring you Kill Team. So obviously there were designers on those games, whoever the hell they were, and it was clear that they had played more modern skirmish games and they wanted to achieve... I will get to your point. I'm going to get to the answer, by the way, to your question. But they wanted to build a skirmish war game that was innovative and was doing something different from the traditional war game kind of paradigm. Do you ever notice how like most Warhammer games tend to be the same thing? They're like D6s, they have a you-go-I-go system. They tend to have, like a weapon skill, a ballistic skill, a strength, a wound stat, right? The armor saves, like there's always 3 rules, right? You got to roll your hit, you got to roll your wound, you got to roll your armor save, or your opponent rolls their armor save. It's always like the same kind of very similar system. It felt like for the first time that Kill Team they were trying to mix things up. They brought in this kind of concealment mechanic, and that is unique as far as I'm aware. I've never played another game like that Kill Team that's quite the concealment mechanic. Now I find Kill Team, I haven't played it in a while, and I do find it a little bit complicated, a little bit obtuse. I saw a big argument on Line of Sight the other day on the Kill Team subreddit, and it was just like, They were really arguing with one another about the line of sight rules in Kill Team, like really vehemently arguing about it. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of glad I don't play this game anymore. What I would recommend, it depends what you liked about Kill Team, but what I would recommend to try would maybe be a game like Infinity. If it's the sci-fi element, it is a very kind of noodly sort of war game where it's very granular. You're really looking at your guys, your dudes, and they can do a lot of different things. They can climb, they can go invisible, they can, and there's lots of those little elements. It uses a D20 system, but there's a reaction system where you can shoot back at people and you get shot at. This might be a game that is of interest to you. It just really depends on what you're into. For example, and it can be weird. For example, if someone was into Necromunda, I would probably recommend the game Lunar to them, which is a really weird game. It depends on what they're into, but if they're into fast-paced gameplay that is wacky and chaotic and very back and forth, and these crazy moments occur during the game, Lunar would be the game for them, I would say. Lunar would be the game for them. That's kind of what typically a lot of Necromunda players say. I really like that stuff. If it's just the setting they're into, then obviously Lunar won't appeal. Ludite70 says, Skaven are pretty much the only original IP GW have. I actually think the Skaven were taken for somewhere else as well. I remember saying, because I thought that too, but I remember hearing from somebody that that the Skaven were actually taken from somewhere else. So alternatives to Kill Team, it's kind of tough to say without knowing what it is you like about Kill Team. Kind of tough to say. But there's a lot of really cool games. I'm honestly increasingly getting into like solo games, which don't really have any comparisons with Warhammer games. To be frank, Warhammer has never really done the solo thing, which is weird. They've done like their more board gamey kind of experiences. Noodle says, why is there not a Jurassic Park board game or war game where you capture dinosaurs? There is. Oh god, Drawing to Earth I think has dinosaurs in it. So you might want to look into Drawing to Earth, Noodles. Chrissy says, I just built and painted a fully painted chitin. Facebook groups loved it, then I dropped the bomb. The entire thing is 3D printed. Tunes quickly changed, but the model of the base code cost me £18 to print. Yeah, fine. Ludite70 says, Wolfie down seats, there is an alternative. Wolfie Dino, is there an alternative to Kill Team that you would recommend? Oh, One Page Rules Grimdark Future Firefight. Of course, yeah, of course. Grimdark Rules do have skirmish games that are very good, very quick, and very easy to play, especially if you already have the models. And Firefight is kind of explicitly designed with Warhammer models in mind, so you're gonna find it very easy to translate over. Let's see. Let's catch up. Fast paced like molasses. I'm saying molasses, boy, molasses. Koda says Dead Zone is the best alternative to Kill Team. One of the few games where 3D terrain is really part of the game and works well, says Kudos. That might be true. I've never played it, but I imagine that's probably the case. Dead Zone obviously being a game that's very much designed around kind of Mantic like to try and ape Warhammer, right? And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Like they kind of set their games up. They were like the original One Page Rules, right? They set their games up to be expressly alternatives to kind of Warhammer content. Whew! All right, guys, it's starting to get a little bit. I'm getting like real tired here. Maybe streaming was a bit of a bad idea today. So I'm gonna be stepping off soon. But if you got any questions or any comments you want to make, let me know. Conrad Internet says, I wish there was more love for 50mm minis in general. It's easier to find online, but in person, it's like being a voice in the wilderness. I get you there. I think at some stage I'll probably play a game and I'll probably fall in love with it. But you know, Bomberman says, Discourse, please do a Discourse review of Carnivale. Bomberman, I have, basically. I mean, I've done in fact, I was thinking the other day that I should do a Carnivale review for patrons, but I basically have done so. It's the top 5 Warhammer games you've never played, or like, it's something called that. In that game, I talk about what's so cool about Carnivale. And there's another video where I talk about Carnivale, which is in the Warhammer Made Me Lose My House, which is probably still the best title I've ever come up with for a video. Yeah, so you could try that one. I think I go in depth on that one, but that was like a long time ago now, so I can't really remember. Were rats were in D&D, says Noodles. Really, they stole Skaven too, says Lilith. They might have. Don't quote me on that. I think they did, because I remember hearing from somebody, because I thought Skaven were original Warhammer, and then somebody was like, actually, no, they're not. And they gave me some source, and I remember that being the case, but I read a lot of comments, so I might be misremembering. Rob Homo says, I can wholeheartedly recommend 5 Parsecs from Home for science fiction. Loads of fun. The thing about 5 Parsecs from Home is, I think it works really well as a solo game. Firstly, I think it's really fun as a solo game. I think it works really well as a kind of as a hobby game, you know, where you're like, you want an excuse to like build some cool models, and you want an excuse to like build some cool sets, some cool tables. I think that's the case. But 5 Parts From Home very much is a skirmish, or it's very much a campaign game. The game doesn't really work as a skirmish game just by itself, because the game is just so fast. It's like incredibly fast. It's kind of a light war game, honestly. The actual war game elements were quite light. The decisions are fun, but they're very light. It's very reminiscent, actually, of like Warhammer 2nd Edition. If you want to see how Warhammer 2nd and 1st Edition played, then 5 Parsecs From Home is probably a really good version of that, because the campaign is a lot of fun. There's like this campaign system with this role-playing game elements that get added around it, where you gotta make decisions, you gotta do these jobs for patrons, and you gotta tell me about it, right? You gotta watch out for you gain rivals and stuff, and they attack you, and aliens invade your planet that you're on. There's a lot of really cool kind of stuff like that. Hello there, Dingo Dundee. Good day. Am I on time for the Australians? Am I on time for the Australians? How's it going? Dingo, you might be pleased to know I was talking there earlier today about how the 2-camera setup is finally in place. So we're going to be able to start talking about some other games, maybe do some other types of content. So looking forward to that. William Marshall says Zuna Alpha is a really solid game too. I have not played Zuna Alpha, but I would like to play it. I have the book. I have the Zuna Alpha book. I don't have models. Someone recommend me some 1980s alternative kind of paramilitary style models. Can someone please recommend those for me? Some Eastern European style things. I would like to play me some Zuna Alpha. I really would, because I would like to review that game soon. Kudo says, GW makes some good models, but bad rules. Yet a lot of people buy third-party models or print them to play GW games. Somewhere, something went wrong. Yeah. I get you. I get the arguments that Warhammer's a bad rule set. And I find it hard to argue against those. People might be surprised to hear, but actually, I am the biggest advocate amongst my friend group for Warhammer. A lot of my friends hate Warhammer, but I'm like, it's not as bad as y'all say. Which might be a little bit wild to some people out there. Jonathan says, on 3D printing before we close, War Machine MK4 has never looked as good as it does now, but I don't understand the pricing structure they went for. Yeah, John, the pricing structure? That is, oof. The pricing structure kind of killed it for me. To be honest, it really did. I just thought, the thing about War Machine is they're really trying to take on Games Workshop, and it just did not take, I don't think. I don't know if the marketplace is the same as it was kind of 13 years ago, you know, when War Machine really took off. I don't know if that's, I don't know. We'll see. But so far, it feels like the launch didn't really quite hit in the way that they were hoping for it to do so. I really don't think so. Zach Wheeler says, I want to play Zone Alpha so bad. Stalker is such a good framework for a skirmish game. Yeah, there's a lot of Osprey Blue Book games that I really want to play. I really want to play. MLP Death Dealer 32 says, where can I send you a link to a Warhammer animation I made? You can put it in my, I've got a Discord. You can throw it up there. Throw it up in the Discord. There's like a section for promoting your own content and stuff like that. So throw it up there. Black Powder on Earth, 28 millimeters, says Gerald Saville. Black Powder. Pure historicals, I don't know. I can't quite. Skaven War and Virtual Overall Army, one of the Games Workshop first Warhammer plastic box set was a sprue which had 10 figures for Skaven, elves, etc. for a total of 6 figures to 60 figures for a tenner, says George. Yes, but did they get the idea for Skaven from somewhere else? Everyone says you can play Zona Alpha with Infinity's Ariadne line. It's less sci-fi and more grounded. They have Spetsnaz. So the Ariadne line is actually the line I bought whenever I was gonna play some Infinity. I played a couple of games of Infinity. I didn't quite take to it, honestly. It just wasn't quite the game for me. I have some friends who really like Infinity. It's just not quite the game for me, I don't think. I want to try it a game at some stage, but I just did not quite take to it personally. I wasn't the biggest fan of the reaction system. This could have been because I was a bad player, but I did not like getting killed over and over again during my own turns. So it could have been a skill issue for sure. Let's see. Joy of Wargaming has a lot of Osprey Blue Book demos, says Noodles. Cool. Sorry guys, I'm running myself a little bit ragged here. My voice is starting to throw, and yeah, it's hard. Coming into it says for 50mm Zone Alpha, basically anything from the AK-47 Republic line will work. Green stuff, some gas masks, and balaclavas. Oh, come on, not green stuff and things. Nope. Discourse don't got the time. You see my pile of shame? I do not have the time to go green stuff and stuff. It has to come out of the box. I have to be able to make it from the contents of the box. I cannot green stuff things. I am a very my hobbying side of things. I'm very bad at it. Basically, I used decals for the first time the other day. I've been in this hobby for like over 20 years. I'm using put on water decals for the first time ever. Come on. Yeah. Dingo, thank you very much for the donation there. For the 10 Australian dollars, says, good to see you, mate. It's 8:15 a.m. here Monday in Australia. Second camera, awesome. Keep up the great videos. And yes, you have a pile of shame. Yes, indeed I do. In fairness, I accumulated it over many years. I accumulated my pile of shame over many years. Over a long period of time. And a lot of them I have like started little bits of, and then it just never ever got around to, you know, and it kind of fell by the wayside. I find as well that in content creation it's a lot harder to tackle this. So the last 2 years I have not been getting very much hobbying done, but I've really struggled to find time to get the hobbying done, because to be perfectly frank, I kind of work 12-hour days doing this full time, especially now with the second channel. It's really tough. It is really hard. I understand now why Ash Barker always looks so goddamn tired. I'm starting to appreciate it too. So it's just tough to get hobbying done. You know, it's really tough. So thank you much for the follow there. Lord Beer says video should be played like an FPS, not an RTS. Well, you just like, you control the one guy, you keep activating the same guy over and over again. Why decals on a black tank, says Alan Foley. What? Firstly, it's not black. It's dry brushed metal. It's a German tank. It's an evil tank. That's why the decals. Look, it looks cool. I like it. It looks impressive. It's got like a little knight. See a little red knight. That's because this tank is the Red Knight. That's what I call it. Yeah, it's lead belcher dry brushed, which, spoiler alert, might be one I use for my Black Templars. Why is your Tiger tank painted black? Nordic Maelstrom. This is an ahistorical. This is my German force are not historical minis. They just aren't. These are the models. Here are the models that I'm working on at the minute. Here. These are my German shock troops. These are like gnarly guys. Is the most diplomatic way I can put it. Very gnarly. And yeah, they are painted in ahistorical colors because they're my own. They are Hellgruppen. They are a division of German soldiers in World War II who are opening a portal to hell to kill King Paimon, the Demon King. So that's the background of my German force. They are not historical. they're more historical than you might think, though. But yeah, that's why everything's painted black, because they're the bodies. They're the bodies. They're the bad Germans. They're the bad Germans. They're the bodies, you know? 333 is half of 666. Exactly, Lord Beard. Now you're catching on. Exactly, that's the vibe. Yes, it was very cool hanging out, Raptor. Thanks for hanging out. You don't know what a pile of shame is until you've got a 3D printer. It does get out of hand sometimes. I got a very big digital one way. John on table says, put the tank away! Why don't you like my tank, John? Why don't you like my tank? Zach Willis says, my purple zebra print tank is made to be tactical distraction. Exactly. Peacock theory. That is a King Tiger. MLP Death Dealer. This is a King Tiger. Nordic Milstrom says, I like the look of the Tiger, to be honest. I think it looks better than it actually was painted. Yeah. I've always been a big fan of like the kind of tanks that look like they've just rolled straight off the line at the battle. I think it's really cool. Are we the body, says Garzini. Yeah, that's exactly the vibe. Lots of skulls on them. Lots of skulls everywhere. Heal Hydra. Kudo says, reminding us all why historical gamers are the best. Kudo says, actually, and I imagine he adjusted his glasses as he said this, it is a Panzer IV-B Tiger II. It was never called a King Tiger until late into the war by the US only. Well, thank you very much for the lesson, Kudos. I'm aware that it's called the Tiger II. I did not know that only the US called it the King Tiger, though. I'll say this much, though, in the rulebook it's called the King Tiger, I believe. So, yep. There was also no SS shock troops dressed with metal armor and green eyes glowing from a gas mask either. But there we are. There we are. They also weren't flying around in 1947 trying to open portals to hell too, but here we go. Watch the movie Iron Sky Germans in Spaces, Dingo. I tried to watch it once, but the version I got did not have a dub on it, or didn't have subtitles, unfortunately. And it took me a little bit of time to realize that all the German they were speaking I was meant to understand, so. Emery Kellyam says, King Tiger with a Zimmerant and a Hebsol turret. I don't know what they are. I don't know what that means. Wolfie Knight says, I reckon Skim were stolen from the Rat King from the Nutcracker, and that's from the 1890s. Nordic Muslim says, as a World War II enthusiast, I prefer the early war German paint schemes for their tanks and vehicles. The look of Panzer is much better than Middlestone. I totally get you. If I was doing like a historical German, like, so I understand this appeal of historical games where you want to kind of accurately, like, if I was like really to get into a historical game and I wanted to play in like historical battles, I was part of a group that were doing like simulations of battles, what I would do is I would pick a historical division of like an army, and I would actively seek out pictures and try to perfectly emulate the colors and things like that of that force. I understand the appeal of that. I get the appeal of that. Like, it is an accurate representation of a force from that time period, and that would be kind of neat. Like, I get that. That's kind of cool. However, I don't really have any groups like that. I have groups that are like, let's play a game of Conflict 47, you know, and I like my historical stuff. So, hence why they're just evil. Yeah. John on Tabletop says, don't disgrace yourselves, fellow Rivet Counters. He does not care about us. I get the appeal of having them be super duper historical. But that's just not for me. It's just not for me to be really super duper historical. I like my spicy takes. Honestly, the thing that kept me out of Bolt Action was the fact that it was pure historical. Whenever I found out about Conflict 47 and I realized that I could create this like background for my army, I was like way more interested in the game all of a sudden, so that I could do that. I just think it's really neat. I just think it's really cool, you know, to take the existing kind of thing and then imagine it in this new context. My entire army, Nordic Maelstrom, is painted. My entire army is painted at this stage. I got my entire German army painted. The King Tiger, I have, I just finishing up the Shock Troopers. I have a guy called Captain Gross, who's like a named character. I have him done, or to be done. And then aside from that, I have I have a box of infantry. I got an assault squad with SMGs. I have a bunch of riflemen, a bunch of LMGs, got a bunch of mortars. I've got a mortar. I've got like an MMG. I have a tank. I've got a couple of. No, I've got a half track with like a little autocannon, and I'm done. They're all painted. All painted. It's my first army that I've ever gotten done. I'm like so hyped about it. It was so cheap and it was like affordable. I was like, yes. Okay, guys, I gotta go. My throat is killing me, and I'm really hungry, and I'm really tired, and yeah, I had to get on today. I had to talk about this topic because I got sucked in. I got sucked into it. I wanted to talk about it again. In a lot of ways, I think that there was connections we could have made. There was, you know, the whole Warhammer hobby thing is kind of connected as well. The way Warhammer, you know, Games Workshop actively try to keep people out of wargaming, I think is like a big problem here too. I think that if the game was a little bit more accessible and they didn't use this kind of this control of discourse, then it would be a bit of a problem. It wouldn't be as big a problem, for sure. I love alt history games as well, dude. I think they're awesome. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. I had a blast. I had an absolute blast just to chatting with you guys. Thank you to everybody who donated, by the way. I really do appreciate it. Helps keeps the lights on at the channel. And yeah, like, thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time, and thanks to everybody who chatted, and thanks to everybody who lurked as well. You gotta shout out to the lurkers. Shout out to the lurkers, to the stalkers. Thanks very much, guys, and I will catch you all later. If you do want to keep chatting, then you check out our Discord. Alternatively, there's also Patreon as well, with little secret Patreon channels where they do get very weird very fast. Thanks very much, everybody, and I hope you keep an eye out on the channel. There will be hopefully more streams. Some of them might be a little bit more casual, a little more chill like this, but maybe some painting, maybe some building, maybe some unboxings of content and talking about other mini games and stuff like that, and maybe even some Warhammer things every so often. And they will be unlisted, so they're not going to stay up on the channel, so keep an eye out for those and try and jump in. Scython, thank you very much for gifting out a Discourse membership there. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And Akatosh Slayer, you got yourself a little Discourse membership. You got your Wolfie Downs. If you're off to buy Conflict 47, tell Warlord I sent you. Tell Warlord I sent you, okay? Tell Warlord I sent you. But yes, looks like Akatosh Slayer, welcome to the Discoursers. Thanks to Scython Naila. Thanks to Scython, who donated it there. Thanks very much, Scython. It's very, very, very kind of you. Thanks very much, everybody. No, like maybe whenever I finish my my German SS troops, maybe I'll show off the force or something like that. That could be kind of neat. It wouldn't be a video. I don't think people care enough for a video, but maybe like on a wee secret live stream at some stage. All right, thanks everybody. It has been a real pleasure, and I will catch you all next time. Bye bye. Woo. Okay, how do I stop streaming this bad boy? I gotta say, that is the third time someone gifted me a membership. See, you keep showing